Chapter 799. It's enough, it's enough. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, there are still a few left, but don't worry, second brother. I'm rushing to refine it for you. There are so many people in ethereal heights. How can it be enough if you don't refine more? That's good. Zhang Xiaohu breathed a sigh of relief. You won't go to ethereal heights again so soon. After all, Zhou Mufeng hasn't seen the effect yet. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, the second thing is not to go to ethereal heights. I want you to help my master, Martial Uncle Lu, and Martial Uncle Shui recover their strength. Ha! Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Didn't you say that you want them to recover at the end? So that they can hide from the eyes and ears of Lingxiang Peak. Well, yes, I thought so at first, but last time I saw that there were fewer eyes and ears on my master's side. If we are cautious, there may not be any problem. Moreover, the point is that I see that other people's martial arts have recovered, but my master and martial uncle still can't recover. This is not a good feeling in my heart. Zhang Xiaohua's face also became serious and said, no problem, second brother, I'll listen to you. Master Wen, Master Lu, and Heroine Shui are our family's saviors. Anything I do for them is not excessive. Tell me, when do you want to go? Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and said, when I was looking for you these days, I also thought about it. Next, you will represent the Pill Tower Hall to trade elixirs with our Misty Hall. This matter is very complicated. Moreover, the matter of Misty Heights is imminent. You and I may not have too much free time. Therefore, it is better to take advantage of the present, before the trade starts, to settle this matter. At that time, everyone's attention will be on the herbs and elixirs, and no one will pay attention to them. Well, what second brother said makes sense. Then let's not delay. Shall we start now? Right now. Come with me. Do you still want me to be your assistant? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, the three martial uncles are all discerning people. I think I won't show up. It won't be too late for me to come out after you have sealed their acupoints. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded. All right, then, you should hide first. After he finished speaking, he walked out of the small courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua also turned invisible and followed behind him. Inside Wenwenhai's small courtyard, the Jianghu hero who used to have a commanding aura was still carrying a small wooden bucket and a small ladle, carefully and patiently watering the small medicinal field in the courtyard. Zhang Xiaohu walked into the courtyard with light steps. Wenwenhai still did not know. After all, he had lost his inner strength and could only see and hear like an ordinary person. Master Zhang Xiaohu suppressed the emotions he was feeling and called out. He. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's call, Wenwenhai raised his head and smiled. What brings you here today, the chief disciple of the Misty Hall? I heard that you have been very busy these days. Master, no matter how much of a chief disciple I am still your disciple. How can I not come to see you? Well, that's good too. Come and take a look at the medicinal herbs in my medicinal field. I have been planting them for a long time and it is time to harvest them. Exchanging some pills from the Pill Expanding Hall can also benefit the disciples of the Misty School. This useless person can finally do something for you. Master Zhang Xiaohu choked up. With such a master and such a disciple in the Misty School, what difficulties in this world could not be overcome? Is it necessary? Xiaohu. Wenwenhai was somewhat impatient. Do you really think that your master is a useless person? No. Zhang Xiaohu quickly waved his hand and said in a low voice, Master, I came here today for something important, not to see your medicinal herbs. Then, he jumped into the room and said in a strange tone, Master, can't you be a little quieter? Xiaohu, how would you know how excited I am? Wenwenhai said somewhat embarrassedly. I thought that with Master's chest as deep as the sea, you would be able to control your emotions. Who knew that you would be as excited as I was when I obtained this method? Zhang Xiaohu said with a smile. Let's not talk about this. Xiaohu, Are you sure you can help me, oh, and your two martial uncles recover their martial arts? Wen Wenhai was still doubtful. More than that, Zhang Xiaohu said dutifully. I can also control the arms and legs of my two martial uncles. Otherwise, how would I dare to tell you about it in front of you? Xiaohu, you. Wen Wenhai grabbed Zhang Xiaohu's hand, almost choking with sobs. I didn't accept you as my disciple for nothing. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu's proud face through his divine sense, Zhang Xiaohua, who was hiding on the ground with her legs crossed, couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Zhang Xiaohu also held Wen Wenhai's hand and said, Master, I should have reported to you long ago, but I didn't dare to confirm whether the method was effective or not. Moreover, the people of Lingxiang Peak were watching over you, so I didn't dare to act recklessly. Now, I only know that it is effective after I tried it on martial uncle He Tianshu. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, Wen Wenhai frowned and said, Xiaohu, this is where you are wrong. Although He Tianshu is not a direct disciple, nor is he your direct martial uncle, he is still an elder. You should tell me about this matter and let me try it first. If your method is really ineffective, wouldn't you be harming your martial uncle He? Zhang Xiaohu didn't think that Wen Wenhai would blame him. His face turned red, but he complained in his heart, Master, this wasn't my idea. It was all Xiaohua's idea. I really don't have the right to say anything. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu's face turn red, Wen Wenhai also felt that his words were a little harsh. He could only say, forget it. In the future, it's best not to do such things that might harm others. Sai, how is your martial uncle He now? Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, I heard from martial uncle He that his condition is very good. Although he hasn't recovered his martial arts, there shouldn't be any problems with my method. It's only a matter of time before he recovers his martial arts. So, I want to take advantage of this time to heal Master and martial uncle's injuries first. Wen Wenhai had already suppressed his excitement. He thought for a while and said, Xiaohu, I don't know what's going on with your method of healing. Zhang Xiaohu scratched his head, Master, don't ask about this. Anyway, it can help you recover your martial arts. Wen Wenhai pretended to be angry and said, Your wings have hardened. You don't even want to tell me this? Sai, isn't this nonsense? Master, I don't know myself. How can I tell you? Zhang Xiaohu secretly complained in his heart. However, he still braced himself and said, Please forgive me, Master. If more people know about this secret, I'm afraid that there will be a reaction from Lingxiang Peak. Wen Wenhai muttered to himself irresolutely for a moment, then nodded and said, I know this. What I mean is, Master and martial uncle's matters are trivial, but your martial ancestor Li and martial ancestor Lu's matters are big. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was happy, this master of ours is really good. Who is chivalrous and righteous? Isn't it Master? Therefore, he moved closer to his ear and whispered a few words. Wen Wenhai's eyebrows were raised in joy and he scolded jokingly, You little brat, you actually have this trick up your sleeve. You've done so much behind Master's back. Alright, although you didn't say it, Master also understands your meaning. The three of us supported you that day. In the future, even if your martial arts recovers, we will definitely support you. You can rest assured. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was also overjoyed. Of course, he couldn't directly tell Wen Wenhai about his plans. However, Wen Wenhai had gone through these few years of tempering his temperament. He had long lost the desire to pursue fame and fortune. How could he not understand Zhang Xiaohu's thoughts after hearing this? Although he didn't have any ambition, if his disciple could have impressive achievements, as a master, how could he oppose it? Just as Zhang Xiaohua and Chang'e had expected, Wen Wenhai immediately expressed his stance. Hearing Wen Wenhai say this in front of them, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat apologetic. After all, Wen Wenhai and the other two were only around 30 years old. They were in the prime of their lives and were in the prime of their lives. As direct disciples, they were more authentic than Zhang Xiaohua. Asking them to give up certain things wasn't something that could be exchanged with an ordinary price. Zhang Xiaohu whispered, Master. When Wenhai waved his hand, don't say such pretentious words. Masters and martial uncles' martial arts and future prospects are all given to us by you. Master and martial uncle won't argue with you about anything. Moreover, looking at the current situation, you can only be a hall master at most. Chapter 800. When Wenhai was right. A disciple of the Misty School was at most a hall master on Shixin Peak. Zhang Xiaohu had the support of Lingering Fragrance Peak. Even without Wen Wenhai, Li Jian, and Lu Qingyang of Misty Mountain Villa, he would still be able to sit in this position. If he wanted to improve, it was basically impossible without an opportunity or a big change. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu also smiled bitterly and said, this disciple only has this idea. No matter whether it is successful or not, I have worked hard. After 100 years, when I see Master O, it can be considered as me being able to answer to him. I have not let down his grace of personally choosing me to enter the Misty School. Good. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu was so determined, Wen Wenhai also nodded. Seeing that he had said what he needed to say, Zhang Xiaohu said, since Master has already agreed, then this matter should not be delayed. I know that there is a small house behind Master's courtyard. It is usually used to store sundries. Let's go there directly. Small house. When Wenhai showed a strange expression and said, don't you need a quiet room? Don't you need to make some preparations? Zhang Xiaohu shook his head and said, no, Master, the time is not too long. After Master recovers his martial arts, don't let the cat out of the bag. When Wenhai laughed and scolded, don't worry. Do you think Master is still a 10-year-old boy who can't hold back anything? Then he frowned and said, but what about your martial uncle Shui and martial uncle Lu's external injuries? It is not easy to hide them. Yes, this matter will be discussed when we see the two martial uncles later. Otherwise, the external injuries will not be treated first. Zhang Xiaohu did not have a good idea. Let me see if your technique is effective before we talk. After that, when Wenhai did not close the door of the small house and took Zhang Xiaohu to the backyard. When they reached the small house in the backyard, Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, Master, I still have to offend you. Disciple has to seal your acupoints first. When Wenhai smiled and said, do whatever you want. Your martial arts are already higher than Master's. Do you think Master will be able to dodge your attacks? When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he took a step forward and pointed his finger at the vital point. Suddenly, he heard Wen Wenhai shout, stop. Xiaohu, do you have to hit the acupoints for this technique? Zhang Xiaohu was taken aback. Yes, Master. We have to order it. Is there a problem? When Wenhai frowned and said, but, when you treat your martial aunt Shui's injuries later, why would she let you do it? That's right. Zhang Xiaohu also realized that Shui Qing was a woman. He had inexplicably sealed her acupoints. Moreover, his age was about the same as Shui Qing's. This was hard to say. Then, what should I do? Zhang Xiaohu looked at Wen Wenhai with a bitter face. How would I know? Wen Wenhai glared at him. Zhang Xiaohua, who was at his feet, anxiously stomped her feet. I have never seen a master and disciple like this. They haven't even finished their own matters and they are already thinking about others. If you want to think about it, then think about it. The key is that others don't know. You don't even know what they are thinking. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohu came to his senses and said, Master. Disciples should help you and martial uncle Lu recover your martial arts first. As for martial aunt Shui, we can talk about it after we see her. That's true. When Wenhai realized that his concern had caused him to be in a mess. After that, when Wenhai lay on the hay in the hut, Zhang Xiaohu extended his fingers and sealed a few of his major acupoints. Then, he carefully called out, Xiaohua, Xiaohua. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua yawned and walked in from outside the hut. She stretched and said, Second brother, are you done wasting time with your master? I slept for a while. Zhang Xiaohu extended his leg and pretended to kick him. He said, "Let's get to work. Don't be lazy." Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes at him and jumped in front of Wen Wenhai. She extended her hand and sealed all of his major acupoints. Then, without any delay, she took out a meridian nourishing pill and placed it in Wen Wenhai's mouth. She held her hand and used her true energy to wrap around the meridian nourishing pill's medicinal power. Then, she sent it straight to his dantian. Wen Wenhai couldn't be compared to Du Feng. He was Zhang Xiaohua's benefactor in the early years. Even O Yen and He Tianshu couldn't compare to him. Therefore, after Zhang Xiaohua left the necessary medicinal power at the hole in his dantian, she used the rest of the medicinal power to refine all of his meridians according to his memory. When Wen Wenhai stopped cultivating his inner energy, his shrunken meridians recovered and expanded by more than 30%. Only then did she send the rest of the medicinal power back to his dantian. Although Zhang Xiaohua used all of her strength this time and was as careful as when she healed He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua's control over her true energy was much more precise now. After refining Wen Wenhai's meridians, Zhang Xiaohua's face wasn't as pale as before. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua open her eyes as if nothing had happened, even Zhang Xiaohu felt strange and asked, "Xiaohua, this is it?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, "Yes, this is it." But Zhang Xiaohu pointed at Zhang Xiaohua's face and said, "Your performance is too relaxed." "Hee," Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, you're really funny. Could it be that only you're allowed to improve your martial arts, but I'm not allowed to improve my martial arts?" Ha! Zhang Xiaohu heard and couldn't help but be overjoyed. He said, "Xiaohua, you're really good. It's only been a few days and your martial arts have improved again. You're really more talented than Du Feng." Du Feng? Zhang Xiaohua's mouth twitched. She felt very helpless. "Can't you find someone more powerful?" Zhang Xiaohu looked at Wen Wenhai and asked, "How is my master now?" "Very good. You just need to unseal his acupoints. Repairing his dantian is much easier than repairing his joints." "Okay, then what's next? Do you want to continue in one spurt of energy or take a break first?" Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat impatient. After checking the jinqi in her body, Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "Then let's continue in one spurt of energy. Otherwise, it will leave something in your heart." Zhang Xiaohu looked at his younger brother who was slightly taller than him and smiled. He stretched out his hand and stroked his brother's long hair without saying anything. Zhang Xiaohua also looked at her second brother and smiled slightly. She turned around and unsealed Wen Wenhai's acupoints. Then, she used a primordial stone to replenish the jinqi in her body. After a while, Wen Wenhai opened his eyes and looked at Zhang Xiaohu who was standing beside him. He asked in astonishment, "Is it done?" Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "Of course it's done." "So fast?" Wen Wenhai still asked, "I thought it would take a long time." Then, he wanted to circulate his jinqi. Unfortunately, his dantian was empty. No matter what, he could not circulate his jinqi. Zhang Xiaohu saw this and said with a smile, "Master, don't be anxious. It will take some time to repair your dantian. You can give it a try after 20 days. If the new jinqi does not dissipate, your dantian will be repaired by then." "Yes, I was a little impatient." Wen Wenhai smiled and said, "My dantian is warm and all the meridians in my body are comfortable. I think your technique is really useful." Then, he climbed up from the ground and pulled Zhang Xiaohu's sleeve and said, "Let's go and find your martial uncle Lu first." Zhang Xiaohu naturally smiled and followed behind him. Lu Yueming's small courtyard was not far away. It was also a deserted area. After the two entered, Zhang Xiaohu stood guard behind the door. After looking for a long time, he did not find any strange people. Only then did he enter the room. Lu Yueming had heard about this from Wen Wenhai long ago. His face was full of joy. Seeing Zhang Xiaohu, he was unable to contain his joy and asked, "Is what your master said true? If martial uncle does not believe me, you can find a disciple to send his Xinqi into Master's meridians and Dantian. Once you check, you will know. Zhang Xiaohu respectfully said. How can I not believe you? I just feel that it is too magical. Lu Yueming rubbed his hands and said, also, can my lame leg be cured? Seeing Zhang Xiaohu nod, Lu Yueming said, I've already thought about it. Xiaohu, since no one comes to my place and I rarely go out, pretending to be lame shouldn't be difficult. I don't want to drag it out forever. No problem, Martial Uncle Lu. However, treating your leg will be very painful. You must be prepared. Lu Yueming waved his hand, who in Jianghu hasn't seen blood before? Why would I be afraid of this? Okay, then Martial Uncle Lu, there is no time to lose. Let's start now. There was no need to explain things in detail. Lu Yueming and Zhang Xiaohu went to the small room in the backyard. Wen Wenhai prepared a cloth belt and a splint. Zhang Xiaohua once again took action. First, she followed the gourd and a ladle. She repaired Lu Yueming's dantian and also refined his meridians. Only then did she crush the injured part of his leg. After reconnecting it, she took a bone-solidifying pill. Lu Yueming only suffered external injuries, which were many times better than He Tianqu's. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua easily finished the treatment. When Wen Wenhai saw Zhang Xiaohu put Lu Yueming on a recliner and brought him to the hall, he unconsciously felt relieved. Chapter 801. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was overjoyed and said, Masters Junior Lu, do you have any good ideas? Let Chang'e come over and stay with you. Isn't that enough? Lu Yueming said casually. This. Zhang Xiaohu frowned. This was a good idea. Chang'e was a female disciple and Zhang Xiaohu's. Junior sister. With her by his side, of course, he would be relieved. However, Zhang Xiaohu had another idea. Since Zhang Xiaohu had already told his master that this secret was only known by Zhang Xiaohu himself. If Chang'e stayed by his side, it meant that Chang'e also knew. Since Chang'e could know, but Wen Wenhai couldn't, this was obviously different. How could Wen Wenhai not have other ideas? Although Wen Wenhai was Zhang Xiaohu's teacher, Zhang Xiaohu didn't want to test his master's trust in him with these unnecessary things. The trust between master and disciple was to be cherished, not to be tested. This test may be out of goodwill, but after a long time and too many times, the trust would inevitably be thin. Zhang Xiaohu looked at Lu Yueming and Wen Wenhai with difficulty. He smiled bitterly and said, if Chang'e can stay by his side, I can let master and master's junior sister go over. We really have to be careful. And Wen Wenhai also explained, Xiaohu is now carrying a heavy responsibility. We still have to be careful. That's not good. Lu Yueming frowned fiercely. He didn't know if it was because of the difficulty of the matter or the pain of his leg injury. He said, little Xue has always been stubborn. If her acupoints are sealed and she stays in the same room with Zhang Xiaohu, she will definitely not agree. Zhang Xiaohu looked at Wen Wenhai for help and said, Master, I'll leave this matter to you. Anyway, this is my filial piety to Master's junior sister. If she doesn't want to, I can't do anything. Aren't you forcing a duck onto a perch? Wen Wenhai smiled bitterly. However, he was still worried about Xue Qing. He said, all right, wait a moment. I'll go and ask. Not long after, Wen Wenhai returned. There was no joy or disappointment on his face. He said calmly, as we expected, junior sister Xue rejected it. There's no room for discussion. However, Xiaohu, I've discussed this with your martial uncle Xue. Can you stay in her inner room instead of the small room in the backyard? Also, can't we close the doors and windows? When Wen Wenhai spoke, it was almost as if he was pleading. He did not sound like a master instructing his disciple at all. Zhang Xiaohu didn't care. This was all caused by Zhang Xiaohua. He thought for a moment and felt that Zhang Xiaohua should be able to accept it. He nodded and said, Of course, master. As long as junior sister Shue's acupoints are sealed, it's best if master does it. After that, master and junior sister can stay in the inner room. Then, he added, master and martial uncle, you can't peek. Do we have to do that? Wen Wenhai and Lu Yueming looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Lu Yueming pointed at his leg. Xiaohu, I think I shouldn't go. This leg has just been reattached. If I move it, won't it be out of shape? Also, if we go together, won't we attract attention? That's right. Wen Wenhai was also surprised. Xiaohu, let's wait until it's late at night when no one is paying attention. Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. Wen Wenhai was right. However, the problem was that Zhang Xiaohua had to sleep at night. If he slept until dawn, who would treat Xueqing's injuries? Zhang Xiaohu shook his head. Master, although it's daytime, we are in the open. Even if someone sees us, they will think it's normal. If it's nighttime, not only will the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak be active, it will be easy for others to see us. Even if other disciples see us, we won't be able to explain it. What's real is fake, and what's fake is real. Lu Yueming nodded. Xiaohu is right. Let's go now. Master's daily teachings are not in vain. At the crucial moment, he can really take the lead. But he complained, this brat, your martial aunt Xue already called you, but you didn't hear her. Is your junior martial sister that good? You didn't even take good care of your martial aunt before running away. When he saw Xueqing's sparkling eyes looking at him, he couldn't help but panic. He added, see if I'll teach you a lesson when we get back. Can you bear to? Xueqing stared at Wen Wenhai's flickering eyes. Your precious disciple has already recovered your martial arts. He's still so tactful. Can you bear to punish him? Wen Wenhai giggled. Of course there's a reward for meritorious deeds. Of course there's a punishment for wrongdoings. Oh, junior martial sister, little who has already left. Do you need senior martial brother to help you up? Xueqing looked at Wen Wenhai and said unhappily, okay, then I'll reward you to help me up. Wen Wenhai was overjoyed. Chapter 802. In just one afternoon, Zhang Xiaohua had healed Wen Wenhai, Lu Yueming and Xueqing's injuries. Although he had made progress in comprehending the heavenly Tao and was able to control his true qi, there was not much true qi left in the meridians of the three of them. After escaping from Xueqing's courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was not enough to return to the alchemy room at the top of Shixin Peak. After pondering for a while, he went straight to the small courtyard of Pill Expanding Hall. That was Zhang Xiaohua's foundation at Shixin Peak. It was inappropriate for him to not return for a long time. According to Zhang Xiaohu, the transaction would be carried out very soon. It was better to appear in the small courtyard more often. When Zhang Xiaohua reached the vicinity of the small courtyard and came out from underground, he heard a noise. Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw a girl in pink standing at the entrance of the small courtyard. She lifted her leg and kicked the courtyard door with all her strength. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and thought, didn't you say that this small courtyard is the territory of Pill Expanding Hall and the disciples of Misty Hall are not allowed to come here without my permission? Who is this female disciple? She is so bold. Just as he was thinking, he heard the female disciple shouting, Ren Xiaoyao, why are you hiding like a turtle? If you have the guts, come out quickly. Since you dare to say such words, you should have the consciousness to admit it. I have been shouting at the door for 2 days. How dare you show your face? Ouch! Listening to the female disciple's voice, there was a hint of charm in her high-pitched voice. Wasn't she Xiao Tian whom he had met in Zhang Xiaohu's courtyard earlier? Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. He didn't seem to have offended this junior sister Xiao. That day, this junior sister Xiao tried to get close to him and wanted the whitening elixir. Although he had an idea and gave the credit to Zhang Xiaohu, but he didn't have such a deep hatred with Xiao Tian. He actually let her block his courtyard door and look for him for 2 days. Seeing Xiao Tian shouting excitedly, Zhang Xiaohua made a hand seal and escaped into the courtyard. Just as he was about to open the door, he heard Xiao Tian say angrily, "Ren Xiaoyao, I know you're inside. Fine, since you don't want to see me, then I'll come again tomorrow. I want to see if you can hide from me for the first time, but how can you hide for the 15th time?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. He didn't want to open the door today, she would come again tomorrow. If he didn't open the door tomorrow, she would come again tomorrow. She would come again the day after tomorrow. She wouldn't be like a sticky fly to get rid of her. It was better to open the door. If there were any grudges, it would be better to get rid of them as soon as possible. Thus, a chant could be heard from the small courtyard, "Who will be the first to wake up from a dream? I will know in my life." The door to the small courtyard of the Dan Hall opened with a bang, along with the singing. Outside the small courtyard, Xiao Tian turned around. Just as he took 2 steps, he heard it and turned around. It was Zhang Xiaohua's thin and long figure standing at the door, stretching and yawning. "You," Xiao Tian ran to the door. "Ren Xiaoyao, did you sleep like a log? I've been calling you for 2 days, why did you only open the door now?" I'm sorry. It's really hard to work. It's rare for me to have the time to sleep in. Who would have thought that there would be someone noisy here? You." Xiao Tian was a little angry and scolded, "Ren Xiaoyao, you. What did you say a few days ago? Let all the disciples of the Shixin Peak know about it. You have to be responsible for your words." Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "Junior sister Xiao, you have to be responsible for your words." "What did I say? How come I didn't know about it at all? You. Didn't you say? You and I. Flirting. Glancing. Long. Heart. Telepathy." Although Xiao Tian was generous and had a feeling of going all out, after all, she was facing a young man. She couldn't help but blush. As soon as Xiao Tian said this, Zhang Xiaohua immediately knew where the problem was. Wasn't it because of the guy called Song Jiong who stopped him halfway a few nights ago, and he spoke without thinking? In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua also understood why the disciples of the Misty Hall looked at her strangely and even pointed at her. Zhang Xiaohua, who understood everything, smiled bitterly in her heart. She scratched her head and said, "Junior sister Xiao, actually, you should also understand what is going on. That night, senior brother Song stopped me and wanted to help you vent your anger. I was just angry at him. You can't take it seriously." "Bah," Xiao Tian spat and said, "This. How can I not take it seriously? I naturally know the origin of this matter. I cannot take it seriously, but the problem is that even if I don't take it seriously, my senior sister and junior sister will take it seriously. You. How can you wash my tainted innocence?" The word "wash" was very clear. Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said helplessly, "That. This matter was also said by senior brother Song. If you want to find someone, you have to find him. What's the use of looking for me? Do you want me to stand at the top of the Shixin Peak and shout to the disciples of the Misty Hall, 'Brothers and sisters who have been deceived, junior sister Xiao and I have a pure relationship'? It is absolutely different from what you think." Who told you to shout like that? If you do this, where am I going to put my face? Moreover, aren't you? The more you smear, the worse it gets." Xiao Tian stomped her foot and said coquettishly. Then what do you want me to do? So that you can calm down?" Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Why don't I go and grab that senior brother Song again, kick him twice, and hang him upside down on the tree to take the big top?" "Pucci," Xiao Tian laughed out loud, "senior brother Song has been tormented by you. The injury on his hand has not healed yet, and he was scared by you. If you do this again, will he still be alive? This won't do, that won't do. Junior sister Xiao, what do you want me to do? Zhang Xiaohua could only ask. This. Junior sister Xiao lowered her head and said, there are 2 paths for you to walk. 2 paths. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised, and asked, you're actually treating me leniently, giving me 2 paths, please instruct me, junior sister Xiao. Xiao Tiantian's head was even lower as she muttered, first, you. You have to be responsible for what you said, You're so bad, do you still want me to continue? Xiao Tiantian stomped her feet and twisted her waist, showing the attitude of a little girl. Although Zhang Xiaohua's heart was slightly moved, her face did not change in the slightest. She smiled and said, that. Junior sister Xiao, please tell me about the second path. Hearing this, Xiao Tiantian was obviously disappointed. She glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and said with a cold tone, the second path is also very simple. Since senior brother Ren has damaged my reputation, then you have to compensate me. Otherwise, I don't mind reporting you to Hall Master Yang, saying that your conduct is improper, and that you casually take liberties with the female disciples in the hall. Faint. Zhang Xiaohua was immediately defeated. She had only casually said a few words a few days ago, but now it had been raised to the level of taking liberties with female disciples. This was really bullying. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's heart was indignant, but her mouth was bitter. Although this matter was exaggerated by Xiao Tiantian, the root of the matter was still her fault. She really should not have spoken blindly. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Junior sister Xiao, although the 2 of us did not fall in love at first sight, bah. Xiao Tiantian was slightly angry, who fell in love with you at first sight? Cough cough, Zhang Xiaohua also knew that her words were inappropriate, although. But it's also very familiar. This is just a misunderstanding, why do you have to bring it to the hall master? Then, he rolled his eyes and said, Junior sister Xiao, if you feel wronged, senior brother can take out some blood replenishing pills as compensation to make up for junior sister's hurt pure heart. You. Xiao Tiantian angrily said, Ren Xiaoyao, you. You underestimate the disciples of our Misty Hall too much. This blood replenishing pill is not commonly seen in the Misty Hall, but in your pill hall, it's a common item. You have the nerve to take it out? Then she added another sentence, if it's the Yuandan pill, this lady can also consider it. Faint, Zhang Xiaohua felt a headache. He had already given his Yuandan pill to Zhang Xiaohu. How could he have any extra? Of course, he couldn't give away the Meridian's nourishing pill and bone solidifying pill. The other pills, such as the blood replenishing pill, were much more valuable than the blood replenishing pill of the incense cult. He wanted to take it out, but who knew that Xiao Tiantian didn't even pay attention to it? At this time, the belated Zhang Xiaohua thought of Xiao Tiantian's words about washing his reputation, and unconsciously slapped his forehead, since junior sister Xiao has said so, then. Senior brother can only take out his most precious whitening pill elixir. Sigh, it's a pity that this pill elixir was given to me by senior brother Zhang, and I haven't used it yet. Only 1 bottle? Xiao Tiantian didn't hold back and asked directly. Of course, I have no relationship with Xiaoxia Zhang. How could he give me more? Besides, if I had 1 more bottle that day, how could I make things difficult for you and junior sistery? Let's exchange 1 bottle per person. Xiao Tiantian rolled her eyes, no, how can 1 bottle make up for the damage to my reputation? Without 2 bottles, I won't agree. 2 bottles? Zhang Xiaohua also snorted and turned to close the door, only have 1 bottle here. Do you want it or not? If you're happy, then report it to Hall Master Yang. At most, we'll go our separate ways. I want to see who Hall Master Yang will side with. You. Xiao Tiantian was deflated and shouted, Ren Xiaoyao, you. Wait a minute, do you really only have 1 bottle? Isn't this nonsense? Senior brother Zhang's pills are only for removing bumps. There's nothing on my face. I'm just a pretty boy. I don't need those. How could he give more? All right, I'll let you off this time. Xiao Tian had a magnanimous look and stretched out her white hand. Quickly give it to me. I won't pursue this matter anymore. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she reached into her bosom and took out a jade bottle. She handed it over and smiled. Please accept it, junior sister Xiao. Xiao Tian proudly took the jade bottle and turned to leave. Looking at Xiao Tiantian's back, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but smile bitterly. She had always taken advantage of others, but today, she actually took advantage of her. If word got out, wouldn't the men of the martial arts world laugh at her? Sigh, who asked her to be so talkative and say a few more boring words? Thinking about this, Zhang Xiaohua turned around and closed the courtyard door. However, the moment she closed the courtyard door, Zhang Xiaohua was suddenly stunned. Chapter 803. While Zhang Xiaohua was regretting that he had said too much, he felt something in his heart. However, it was only a vague feeling, and it was not clear. When he closed the door, a sentence appeared in his mind like lightning. This was what Qiu Tong had said in the morning: every drink and every peck is the way of karma. Yes, it was the way of karma. Zhang Xiaohua was like a lost person who suddenly saw a glimmer of light in the darkness. He immediately gained some understanding of the way of karma. A few days ago, Zhang Xiaohua had encountered Song Zhiyong causing trouble. If it was just to teach him a lesson and not talk too much, then the past would have been over. However, in order to teach Song Zhiyong a lesson, Zhang Xiaohua spoke a few more words and said a lot of things that should not have been said. These words involved Xiao Tian, which was the cause. When Xiao Tian heard these words, she angrily came to seek justice. Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to lower his head and apologize. He gave away the whitening elixir to calm the waves. This was the effect. O Yen saved Zhang Xiaohua and took Zhang Xiaohua into Huanxi Mountain Villa. She instructed He Tianshu to teach Zhang Xiaohua martial arts and lent Zhang Xiaohua a book on the cultivation of herbs. This was the cause. Zhang Xiaohua followed O Yen to the south and encountered an assassination attempt on a rainy night. Zhang Xiaohu stepped forward bravely and saved O Yen. This was the effect. Zhang Xiaohua saved O Yen and O Yen introduced Zhang Xiaohu to the Misty School. Zhang Xiaohua also received the gratitude of sect leader O and obtained the Worry-Free Sutra from the Misty School's library. This was the cause. Zhang Xiaohua received endless benefits because of this Worry-Free Sutra and entered the ranks of Qi practitioners on the path of immortality. She also learned the art of alchemy and refined the awakening elixir, which saved O Yen again. This was the effect. Looking a little further, back then, when Wenhai, Xueqing, and Lu Yuanming all saved Zhang Xiaohua's family. This was the cause. Zhang Xiaohu entered the Misty School and became a disciple of Wenhai. Zhang Xiaohua also entered the path of immortality and refined elixirs of the path of immortality such as the Meridian Nourishing Elixir and the Bone Solidifying Elixir. These elixirs could save the three of them and restore their damaged internal energy. This was the effect. Zhang Xiaohua had rescued Nie Qianyu on the way back to Pingyang City. He was a hero and escorted her safely to Rejuvenation Valley for thousands of miles. This was the cause. With the help of Valley Master Nya of Rejuvenation Valley, Zhang Xiaohua came to the fragrance cult and found his second brother, Zhang Xiaohu. This was the effect. In order to save Li Yinfeng's family of three, Zhang Xiaohua broke into Shizui Mountain alone. This was the cause. As a result, he obtained the elixir furnace from the secret room of the bandits. Because he was chased and captured by Qin Shiyue, he went out to sea with him and landed on a deserted island overseas. There, he learned the talismans and formations of the path of immortality and obtained many other things. During the secluded orchid evening refinement, if Zhang Xiaohua did not sacrifice himself to draw the yellow wind away in order to save the disciples of the pill-expanding hall, how could he have obtained the delusion breaker eye? How could he have met Zhang Xiaohu who was trapped by the blood wolves? What about such a fruitful cause? Well, if Zhang Xiaolong did not stand up for the cause in Lu Town, how could there be the effect of Lu Qian pledging herself to him? At the moment when Zhang Xiaohua turned around to close the door, Zhang Xiaohua sighed with emotion. Thousands of thoughts flashed through his mind. He thought about all the things that had happened in the past few years and thought about the causes and effects clearly. The causes and effects of all the things were obvious and complicated. There was even a faint predetermined. If he could not figure it out, it would be even more chaotic. Then, in the starry sky of the Tao of Heaven, there was another burst of thunder and lightning. In addition to the embryonic form of the Tao of Life and Death that Zhang Xiaohua had comprehended before, the outline of the Tao of Karma that Zhang Xiaohua had just comprehended today was also faintly visible. In the Tao of Heaven, it was unknown how much of the Tao of Heaven and Earth was contained. It was also unknown how much could be comprehended and how much could not be comprehended. The Tao of Life and Death distinguished life and death, separated yin and yang, and built the cycle of life and death. The Tao of Karma deduced the past, the present, and the future, and connected the origin, beginning and end of everything in the world. Everything in the world could not escape from life and death, and could not escape from the Tao of Karma. The mysteries contained in these two Tao of Heaven were far from what Zhang Xiaohua, a Qi practitioner in the middle stage of the Qi refining stage, could understand. However, Zhang Xiaohua was lucky enough to feel a trace of the operating outline in this martial world where the Tao of Immortals had been annihilated for 10,000 years. It had to be said that cultivation was the cultivation of one's mind and body. Even an ordinary life in the martial world contained the magical power of the Tao of Immortals. The operation of the Tao of Heaven and Earth was not something that could be easily comprehended by those who only knew how to kill and take revenge. It was also not something that could be comprehended by those who were isolated from the mortal world and only focused on personal cultivation. It could only be comprehended by those who were magnanimous, chivalrous, and willing to sacrifice themselves for others. Chapter 804. The figure in the long robe appeared out of nowhere. Under the moonlight, he looked like a ghost. Senior brother Ding immediately broke out in cold sweat when he saw him. He immediately shielded junior sister Yi behind him. Junior sister Yi didn't seem to be able to react. She asked shyly, "Senior brother. You? What are you doing?" Senior brother Ding didn't reply. He only used his right arm to hold junior sister Yi behind his back. He asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? How dare you sneak into my Shixin Peak at night?" A deep and hoarse voice sounded, "Are you Ding Chao?" "Yes, I am." "May I know what business you have with me?" Senior brother Ding remained calm. The black figure was still worried. "Are you Ding Chao from the 3 Talents of Misty Hall?" "Yes, I am. In the Misty Hall of Shixin Peak, only I am called Ding Chao. There is no one else." Ding Chao said proudly. "Good. Since you are Ding Chao, it will be easy." That black figure chuckled. Soon after, it floated up and sent a palm towards Ding Chao's chest. Ding Chao didn't ask why. He crossed his legs and got into a fighting stance. His right hand also sent a palm strike towards the black figure's weak point. The black shadow did not panic. Just as the two palms were about to reach each other, it suddenly turned its palm into a claw and grabbed Ding Chao's wrist in a split second. With a little force, Ding Chao felt half of his body go numb and he lost all of his strength. The black shadow did not hesitate. Its other hand reached into its chest and took out an item. With a swing of its hand, it threw it into Ding Chao's slightly opened mouth. Poison? Ding Chao's first thought was that the black figure was going to poison him. His first reaction was to spit it out. At this time, the black figure said in a hoarse voice, "If you spit it out, I will crush her throat." Ding Chao was shocked. When he saw clearly, the hand that the black figure used to throw the poison into his mouth was choking junior sister Yi's throat. The black figure was staring at him coldly. Ding Chao was instantly shocked by the black figure's unparalleled martial arts. How is this possible? In just a single exchange, his wrist had been seized and he was unable to move. Junior Marshall's sister E was like a weak woman who was unable to even truss up a chicken. Even after the other party threw the poison into her mouth, she was still unable to retaliate at all. While Ding Chao was hesitating, the poison had already turned into a fragrant pill liquid and flowed down his throat. Ding Chao sighed and swallowed the pill liquid. He said in a low voice, "You came for me. Junior Sister E just happened to come at the right time. I have already consumed your medicine. If you have anything to say, just say it. Please do not harm Junior Sister Yi's life." Hee hee. That black shadow sneered again. "Since you know that I have ill intentions, you actually dared to consume the poison that I gave you. Your guts are really not small." Ding Chao smiled bitterly. "Your Excellency is holding this Ding's life in your hands, and you're even using Junior Sister Yi's life to threaten me. No matter how unheroic this Ding is, even if this is a poison that pierces the intestines, I will still obediently drink it. I didn't expect you to be so protective of the fairer sex." "I can't tell." Ding Chao frowned. "Is there something you need? If there is, please say it quickly. If there isn't, please let Junior Sister E go first." That black shadow laughed again. "Don't be anxious, don't be anxious. I am only asking you a question. If your answer is satisfactory, I will immediately let your Junior Sister E go. Please say it. It's very simple." "Ding Chao, I heard that you are one of the 3 talents of the Misty Peak. I admire you very much. I want you to do something for me." "Do something for you?" Ding Chao was enlightened when he heard this. He sneered and said, "You must be someone from the Lingering Fragrance Peak. You are a dignified inner court disciple, yet you dare to joke with us juniors. Don't you feel ashamed?" "Hee hee, whether I feel ashamed or not is my business. I only want to ask you, are you willing to pledge your loyalty to me? Don't forget that you have just consumed my poison. If you don't have my antidote, you will die from bleeding from your 7 orifices in 4 hours. You have miscalculated. I am not Zhao Jian. I will not do such a treacherous thing. A man of character is indomitable. If I die, so be it. At least I will be able to see sect leader O in the underworld sooner." That black shadow was in disbelief. He pulled his right hand forward and pulled the chicken-like Junior Sister E in front of him. He sneered and said, "Ding Chao, if you don't agree, I will immediately crush this girl's neck. Let's see if you still feel sorry for her." Junior Sister Yi's throat was grabbed by the black shadow. She could not say a word and could only struggle with her hands and feet. Ding Chao looked at Junior Sister E and said in a low voice, "Junior Sister E, it is all my fault. I should not have followed you. If I was not worried about your safety, I believe that this person would not have come across you and me." He then smiled bitterly and said, "Junior Sister E, if this person had other conditions, even if he wanted my life, I would have agreed. As long as he let you go and let you leave safely. However, if he wants me to betray the Misty School and join the Fragrant Religion, forgive me. I cannot agree. Junior Sister E, don't worry. If this person wants your life, I will not be able to live. I will immediately accompany you in the underworld." His words were resolute and decisive. Junior Sister E stopped struggling when she heard his words. She stared at Ding Chao with sparkling eyes as if she could see through Ding Chao's heart. Ding Chao also looked at Junior Sister E apologetically. She was surprised and happy. She was surprised because if she could comprehend the way of karma, then wouldn't it mean that she could predict everything in advance, and she could follow the vine to the melon? Wasn't this what people often said in biographies? Pinch your fingers and you will know everything in your heart. This was an immortal-like method. She was happy because she didn't know what kind of dog's hit luck she had. She was actually able to comprehend the way of karma. Although she hadn't seen its true appearance, since she had a preliminary outline, then she had a direction to advance Indiana. This fortuitous encounter, wasn't it even more fortunate than obtaining the Carefree Heart Sutra, God guidance, and other completed cultivation techniques? However, Zhang Xiaohua's heart trembled. The way of heaven is boundless, and I will search it up and down. His goal was very high. Although he didn't know if other cultivators of the immortal Tao had such a fortuitous encounter, even if he used his heel to think, it was definitely extremely rare. Since he had such a goal to pursue, if he didn't work harder, then, wouldn't he suffer the wrath of the heavens? The only thing she could do was to take one step at a time and walk steadily on the path of pursuing the way of heaven until it was dark. No matter how difficult the path was, no matter how dangerous the path was, even if she had to sacrifice her life, even if she had to use 3 or 5 lifetimes, as long as there was a trace of belief that was not destroyed, she would comprehend the way of heaven, one by one, and understand it in her heart. Zhang Xiaohua, who was like a lowly ant in front of the way of heaven, actually made such a grand wish in the pill room at the top of Shixin Peak. To be honest, she really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. However, how many things in the world could be predicted in advance by a layman like Zhang Xiaohua? If she understood the true vastness of the way of heaven, perhaps, she wouldn't dare to have such thoughts in her heart. However, it was precisely this fearless belief of the ignorant that created the legends of countless heroes throughout the ages. Chapter 805. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua woke up from her meditation. Nothing had changed except that there was a trace of confidence in her eyes. It was a kind of confidence that seemed to be able to see through the 9 nether realms. There was also a kind of mystery that no one could understand. At this time, in the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace, the refining of the dozens of medicinal herbs was just right. Zhang Xiaohua did not delay. In the 2 pill rooms, she mixed these refined medicinal liquids together and began to melt them. Perhaps it was the improvement in the cultivation of the way of heaven a few days ago, or perhaps it was the enlightenment of the way of karma yesterday. Today, the melting process was unusually smooth. Even the qi in the meridians was consumed very little. It seems that the direction of understanding the way of heaven and the talisman is temporarily correct. Zhang Xiaohua was secretly proud of her wisdom. Coming down from the top of Shixin Peak, Zhang Xiaohua did not hide her whereabouts. She swaggered straight to Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard. Now that Zhang Xiaohu's situation was rising, as the representative of the pill expanding hall, she expressed a little enthusiasm and paid a visit to her benefactor. Presumably, even the people of Lingering Fragrance Peak could not say much, right? When Zhang Xiaohua approached Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard, sure enough, there were no traces of people in the past. There were only a few disciples going in and out, and it seemed to be very busy. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua, those who were familiar with her casually cupped their hands. Those who did not know her would also take a few more glances and did not forget to whisper to each other. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua was embarrassed. Is this Xiaoxia's reputation really as bad as what junior sister Yi said? It seems that sometime, I also need to use the whitening pill liquid to wash it. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but sniff. It seemed that she could still smell the fragrance of Zhang Xiaohu's bath water at the entrance of the small courtyard. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua come in, Zhang Xiaohu, who was sitting in the main hall, had a smile on his face. He stood up and cupped his hands. Junior brother Ren, you haven't come to my place for a long time. What brings you here today? Zhang Xiaohua looked at the 2 disciples beside her and returned the greeting. She smiled and said, I'm not well informed. I just found out that senior brother Zhang has been promoted to the chief disciple of Ethereal Hall. You can't run away from the title of senior brother Zhang. You're too polite, you're too polite. Zhang Xiaohu invited Zhang Xiaohua to sit on a chair, and then he exchanged a few words with the 2 disciples next to him. Modestly, he said, everything depends on Tuadan Hall, Chenkuan Hall, and other brother halls Shidi's help. By the way, why did you stand me up last night? I've been waiting for you for a long time, but you didn't come. The last sentence was asked with a smile after the 2 disciples had walked far away. Hee, second brother, I met with something interesting yesterday. Following that, Zhang Xiaohua told him about Xiao Tian, Ding Chao, and junior sister Yi. Ha! When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was also surprised and said, I didn't expect senior brother Ding to be so loyal to my misty school. This meridian nourishing pill is not wronged. But Xiaohua, weren't your methods last night a bit sinister? Sinister? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I gave him 20 years of cultivation for free. Can't he check it out? That's true. If his temperament is not firm, it's better not to raise a tiger and invite calamity. However, senior brother Du has been in seclusion for a long time and has not come out yet. There is still no news from senior brother Ding. How about I go and take a look later? Forget it, second brother. Hall Master Yang considered that I have never participated in these matters before and sent someone to tell me about it and listen to my opinion. The disciple just now left, so it should be noon. There should be no one here at this time. Then, he walked to the door and locked it, then said, This is good, the world is peaceful again. That's good. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. The 2 elemental essence pills were indeed a concern, it was better to take them as soon as possible. After Zhang Xiaohua placed a restriction around the room, she had Zhang Xiaohu sit cross-legged on the bed. She placed her hand on his back and sent a strand of true qi into his body. First, she looked at the black and white ball of internal energy in his dantian and saw that there were no changes. She smiled and said, Second brother, your internal energy ball really doesn't seem to be full. It hasn't changed in the past few days. I wonder if taking these 2 elemental essence pills will make it bigger. Who knows? Zhang Xiaohu said and took out a jade bottle. He poured out an elemental essence pill and asked, Should I take them one by one or 2 at once? Zhang Xiaohua's head was filled with black lines. Second brother, is there even a need to ask? If you don't want to live, take one first. Hee hee. Zhang Xiaohu laughed and sent the fragrant elemental essence pill into his mouth. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to delay. She wrapped a strand of true qi around the pill and sent it into his dantian. Then, she slowly released the pill beside the black and white ball of energy. The moment the pill left Zhang Xiaohua's true qi, it was immediately absorbed by the black and white ball of energy. Then, without Zhang Xiaohua's instructions, Zhang Xiaohu circulated the elemental essence mental technique and extracted the elemental essence pill from the ball of energy. He sent it into his meridians to refine it. When she saw that Zhang Xiaohu's meridians were flowing smoothly, Zhang Xiaohua didn't stop to send the pill's medicinal energy into the ball of energy. In the time it took to eat a meal, the entire elemental essence pill was absorbed by the ball of energy. Zhang Xiaohu circulated his cultivation technique a few more times and completely refined it. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she asked, Second brother, how do you feel? Are there any changes between the elemental essence mental technique and the ethereal divine art? Zhang Xiaohu muttered to himself, It's still alright. The ethereal divine art's internal energy actually increased along with the elemental essence mental technique's internal energy. However, the increase wasn't as much as the elemental essence mental technique, so there was a slight imbalance. Let me circulate the ethereal divine art a few more times first. As he spoke, Zhang Xiaohu circulated his cultivation technique a few more times before opening his eyes. He said in surprise, Xiaohua, I didn't expect that the elemental essence pill would have an effect on the ethereal divine art. The few circulations just now were enough to make up for the difference between the 2 types of internal energy. It's simply much faster than usual. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she fell into deep thought. Although the elemental essence pill was only effective for the elemental essence mental technique, due to the existence of the black and white ball of energy, Zhang Xiaohu's dantian needed a kind of balance. When the internal energy of one type of mental technique skyrocketed, it would also increase the internal energy of the other type of technique. It was truly amazing. The way of balance. This phrase immediately appeared in Zhang Xiaohua's mind. Unfortunately, there was no outline of the way of heaven this time. There was no movement at all. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head in amusement and thought to herself, It seems that my comprehension of the way of heaven is almost to the point of being obsessed. Everything has to rely on the way of heaven. I don't even know if it's correct. Sigh, isn't the way of balance the way of heaven? However, Zhang Xiaohua was ridiculously wrong. The way of balance was needless to say. It was one of the principles of the way of heaven. It was extremely profound. How could Zhang Xiaohua comprehend it with just a little bit of feeling? Besides, this fellow was a little greedy. He had just comprehended karma and now he wanted to comprehend the way of balance. How could there be such a cheap thing in this world? Otherwise, true cultivation, immortal cultivation, and even divine cultivation wouldn't be so difficult. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua in a daze, Zhang Xiaohu asked nervously, "Xiaohua, is there anything important? There won't be any problems, right?" Zhang Xiaohua woke up and said with a smile, "No, it's normal. It's just that I thought of something else. Oh, I'll take the last universal pill right away." After saying that, she let Zhang Xiaohu put the last universal pill into his mouth. Then, she manipulated her true qi to help Zhang Xiaohu refine the last universal pill. In fact, just when Zhang Xiaohua was laughing at herself for being a little sensitive, she was somewhat belittling herself. Although she hadn't seen any signs of the way of balance, she had a slight feeling of the way of heaven. That seed was quietly buried. As for when it would take root, when it would sprout, and when it would grow into a towering tree, it would depend on Zhang Xiaohua's luck in the future. Zhang Xiaohua skillfully manipulated her true qi and sent the medicinal power of the universal pill into the black and white qi. She watched as Zhang Xiaohu circulated the universal mental cultivation method and withdrew her true qi. But at this time, outside the restriction, outside Zhang Xiaohu's small courtyard, there was a sudden knock on the door. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. Calm, there are more chapters. Zhang Xiaohu frowned and shouted, "Which disciple is it? How reckless! Don't you know how to cherish public property?" Zhang Xiaohua kept the jade talisman at the side and whispered, "Second brother, go ahead. I will go and see Captain He." "All right." Zhang Xiaohu nodded. Just as he was about to leave, he heard the disciple outside shouting, "Eldest senior brother Zhang, there is an urgent matter in the Misty Hall. Hall Master Yang, Vice Hall Master Qian, and Vice Hall Master Qin are waiting for you in the Misty Hall." "Got it, I will go immediately," Zhang Xiaohu replied. "Also, eldest senior brother Zhang, I heard from the disciple that the junior brother Ren of the Pill Expanding Hall is also here. Hall Master Yang has already sent someone to the Pill Expanding Hall to look for him. If he is here, quickly ask him to go with you. There is an important matter for him." After that, the disciple left. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Hall Master Yang actually has an important matter for me? What can it be?" Zhang Xiaohu pursed his lips and smiled. "If he only looked for me and said it was an important matter, I naturally wouldn't be able to guess it. But he actually called you. Isn't there a need to ask? It must be about the transaction between the Misty Hall and the Pill Expanding Hall." Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head and thought for a moment. She didn't have any clue and smiled. "I guess it is related to both of us. But, it can't be considered an important matter, right?" Zhang Xiaohu shrugged, "Who knows? Maybe the three hall masters think it is important. Anyway, what they said is what the entire Shixin Peak thinks is right. Let's go and see." The two brothers, Zhang Xiaohu and Zhang Xiaohua, pretended to be familiar disciples. They chatted and laughed as they came to the Misty Hall. But when they walked into the Misty Hall, they were stunned. It turned out that in the Misty Hall, other than the three hall masters, there were two familiar and unfamiliar people. "Everyone, who do you think they are?" "One is Elder Yu of the Huanxi Manor. The other is Senior Uncle Bai of the Misty Hall who lost an arm." Needless to say, if Elder Yu came to look for Zhang Xiaohua, Senior Uncle Bai would definitely be looking for Zhang Xiaohu. Seeing Elder Yu, Zhang Xiaohua's heart thumped. Could it be that Oh Yan's condition has changed again? Of course, she only told Oh Yan that she was a disciple of the Pill Expanding Hall and that she was at the Shixin Peak. she didn't say where she lived. If Elder Yu wanted to find her, not only did he have to pass through the disciple guarding Lingering Fragrance Peak, he also had to pass through Yang Rupiang of the Misty Hall. If Yan's condition didn't change, why would Elder Yu suddenly come here to find her? Although Zhang Xiaohua saw Elder Yu, she still acted as if she didn't know him. Although Elder Yu was extremely anxious, he still sat firmly on the chair. Only when Zhang Xiaohua walked in did he seem slightly surprised. To be honest, these were all Qiu Tong's repeated reminders before Elder Yu came. They absolutely couldn't give away Zhang Xiaohua's identity. And, you don't say, it was really effective. When Mistress Qin and Vice Hall Master Qin of the Misty Hall saw Elder Yu coming to look for the pill-expanding hall's apprentice, she had some doubts in her heart. Hence, she purposely didn't mention that Ren Xiaoyao looked the same as Zhang Xiaohua 5 years ago. When Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua's shocked expression and how she sat firmly on the chair, her doubts were completely dispelled. Elder Yu looked at Mistress Qin and asked in a low voice, Vice Hall Master Qin, this child behind Zhang Xiaohu, is Zhang Xiaohua? Or is she a little apprentice of the pill-expanding hall? Isn't Elder Yu also shocked? He's naturally a little apprentice of the pill-expanding hall. Let's not talk about whether Zhang Xiaohua is still alive. Even if she is, he wouldn't come to Shixin Peak. Furthermore, this little apprentice's martial arts are also very refined. That stupid Zhang Xiaohua can't be compared to him. When Elder Yu heard this, his gloomy heart turned into a slight smile. Zhang Xiaohua pretended not to know and followed behind Zhang Xiaohu to greet the 3 hall masters. After the greetings, Elder Yu and Martial Uncle Bai both opened their mouths and wanted to speak first. Yang Rupiang looked at them and smiled, Martial Nephew Bai, don't be anxious. We're all family. Ren Xiaoyao is from the pill-expanding hall, so let's pay attention to outsiders first. Martial Uncle Bai looked at Elder Yu and nodded. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he asked curiously, may I know why Hall Master Yang has called this little one over? Is there an urgent matter? Before Yang Rupiang could speak, Elder Yu asked anxiously, it's like this, Nephew Ren. My young lady's body isn't feeling well. Do you have the Spirit Awakening pill here? It's broken. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he knew that his guess was right. Yan's condition had relapsed, but he still frowned and cupped his hands, I'll let Uncle know. The Spirit Awakening pill is a pill from Lingering Fragrance Peak. How can my pill-expanding hall have it? Even if we have it, how can a little apprentice like me have it? Elder Yu's face was filled with disappointment. Sigh, I thought your pill-expanding hall was famous for its pills. This Spirit Awakening pill would definitely be available. Yang Rupiang also smiled, I knew it, Elder Yu. How can the pill-expanding hall have such a precious pill? You still don't believe me. I've already sent someone to Lingering Fragrance Peak to ask for the Spirit Awakening pill. If they're not lacking, they'll be able to get it in 2 days. Oh right, I wonder what illness Yen is suffering from. Why does she need the Spirit Awakening pill? Vice Hall Master Gao also interjected, the refinement of the Spirit Awakening pill is extremely complicated. There's very little stock of it in Lingering Fragrance Peak. If it's an ordinary pill, I can bring some with me. Chapter 807. This. Zhang Xiaohua was at a loss after hearing Qiu Tong's explanation. He had treated Yan's illness based on the judgment of the Lingering Fragrance Peak's godly doctor. He only knew that the Spirit Awakening pill was effective. Since the Spirit Awakening pill refined by the Lingering Fragrance Peak could slow down the loss of Yan's life force, then the Spirit Awakening pill refined by him would definitely have an even better effect. Zhang Xiaohua's judgment was also extremely accurate. Yan immediately woke up after consuming the Spirit Awakening pill, and her life force stopped flowing. But as for why the Spirit Awakening pill was effective, Zhang Xiaohua had no idea at all. Zhang Xiaohua patted Qiu Tong's shoulder when she saw her crying. Big sister Qiu Tong, don't worry. Let me take a look at Miss again. Okay. Qiu Tong had no other choice. She could only look at Zhang Xiaohua with pleading eyes. How could Zhang Xiaohua dare to look at Qiu Tong's pleading eyes? She could only avoid them and carefully observe Oh Yen. Oh Yen lay there in a daze. Her expression was frozen, and her eyes were motionless. She was no different from a dead person. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense and realized that the life force that had stopped flowing after consuming the spirit awakening pill was now slowly flowing again. Could it be? Could it be that the immortal Dao's pills are not effective? Zhang Xiaohua was at her wit's end. After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua reached out and circulated her true energy to seal the major acupuncture points in Oh Yan's head. She stopped the flow of life force first. As the acupuncture points in Oh Yan's head were sealed, Oh Yan's eyes slowly closed, and she fell into a deep sleep again. Zhang Xiaohua heaved a sigh of relief when she saw this. If she could stop the flow of life force, then she could save Oh Yan's life. Although she could only be a sleeping beauty, it was still better than dying. Qiu Tong was also slightly comforted when she saw that Zhang Xiaohua had put Oh Yan to sleep again. However, Qiu Tong was a little hesitant. Xiaohua, we can't just let Miss sleep like this forever. Is there another way? Qiu Tong also knew that if Zhang Xiaohua had any other ideas, she would have used them a few days ago. Why would she wait until today? However, she really didn't want to give up any hope. What if Zhang Xiaohua forgot something and was reminded by her now? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and shook her head slightly. She took out a jade bottle from her bosom and handed it to Qiu Tong. There are more than 10 fasting pills here. Sister Qiu Tong, take them first. Qiu Tong's face was filled with disappointment, but she still stretched out her hand and slowly caught the jade bottle. She carefully placed it in her bosom, as if it was the most precious thing in the world. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and faced Oh Yan, who was lying on her back on the bed. She subconsciously rested her chin on her hand and frowned in thought. Oh Yan took the soul-reviving pill. It can suppress her illness and stop the loss of her life force. This means that the soul-reviving pill has some effect. However, when her expression became sluggish and her life force continued to flow away, it can't be said that the soul-reviving pill has no effect. It can only be said that the medicine is not right for the illness. Therefore, even the magical pills of the immortal Tao cannot cure her. However, when I hit the acupoint on Oh Yan's head with my true qi, it worked. It helped Oh Yan get out of her daze and return to sleep. This means that the root of Oh Yan's illness is still in her head. But there's nothing strange about her head. Then where is the root of the illness? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and released her divine sense again. She carefully scanned Oh Yan's Muon palace over and over again. However, she didn't find anything. What should I do? Zhang Xiaohua slowly pondered in her heart. If it really doesn't work, then she can only be a sleeping beauty. After a period of time, I will unseal her acupoints and let her wake up for a while. She probably won't wake up in the future. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was thinking hard, in the misty hall, Zhang Xiaohu's face was full of shock. He looked at Marshal Uncle Bai and asked in disbelief, Marshal Uncle Bai, are you right? Marshal. Ancestrally, he agreed to accept the help of the incense cult. Oh, no, the misty hall. Because he couldn't believe it, Zhang Xiaohu almost stuttered. Marshal Uncle Bai looked inside the misty hall. Not only was Zhang Xiaohua surprised, even Yang Rupiang, Gao Kunheng, and Aunt Qin's eyes were wide open and their mouths fell to the ground. He smiled and said, Marshal Nephew Zhang, you are wrong. It's the help of the misty hall, not the other way around. Cough, cough. Zhang Xiaohu coughed twice and said apologetically, this disciple is indeed wrong. I should be punished. This news is really unexpected. I almost can't believe my ears. Yes, not only Zhang Xiaohu, but the 3 hall masters also couldn't believe it. Since the Misty School's Li Jian and Lu Qingyang came to the Shixin Peak, they were separated from the Misty School's young disciples according to the Lingering Fragrance Peak's wishes. They occupied a corner of the Shirshin Peak and supported themselves. Not only did they achieve the goal of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, but they also became more isolated. They didn't even want to see anyone from the Lingering Fragrance Peak or the Misty Hall. They didn't accept anything. This of course made the leader of the Lingering Fragrance Peak feel gratified, but at the same time, it also gave her a headache. The leader's intention was that at the beginning, she was afraid that the Misty School's disciples who had been abolished would hate the incense cult. Chapter 808. Zhang Xiaohu snickered. What kind of bewitching words could he say? All he had to do was to treat the stone cow's joints and repair Zhou Mufeng's dantian. However, when Martial Uncle Bai was spouting nonsense, Zhang Xiaohu had already understood Li Jian's intentions. Now that he heard Yang Ruping's question, he immediately said, Hall Master Yang, this disciple only went to visit Martial Ancestor Li and explained the recent situation in the hall. As for the matter of me becoming the chief disciple, I did not mention a single word. This disciple was also hiding his own selfish motives. Seeing that Martial Ancestor Li was in a bad mood, I was afraid that I would make him unhappy. If I were to be rejected this time, it would be hard to say what would happen in the future. When Yang Ruping heard this, she looked at Zhang Xiaohu thoughtfully. When she first came to Shirshin Peak, she tried to get in touch with Li Jian. Not to mention from the perspective of Lingering Fragrance Peak, but as O Peng's widow, taking care of Li Jian and Lu Qingyang was also something she should do. Unfortunately, Li Jian did not even want to meet her, which made Yang Ruping extremely embarrassed. In the next few years, Yang Ruping extinguished the thought of taking care of them on behalf of her husband, but Zhong Pei never gave up on roping them in. Although he failed every time, he could still try again. Who would have thought that this inconspicuous Zhang Xiaohu only took one trip and actually got it done? Could it be that there was something she did not know? However, what could make Li Jian compromise? Well, taking a step back, what did Zhang Xiaohu have that could make Li Jian compromise? That's impossible. Compared to the past, Zhang Xiaohu had only participated in the Orchid Dusk refinement once. In the eyes of Lingering Fragrance Peak's disciples, it was just a little more exciting than the usual outing. Even though this year's Orchid Dusk refinement had a little accident and Zhang Xiaohu had a little chance and obtained a cinnabar fruit, but, in the eyes of Lingering Fragrance Peak, it was just a little bit of dog shit luck. It really did not count as anything. Then what was the possibility? Spiritual herbs. Zhang Xiaohu didn't have any of the 4 carriages worth of spiritual herbs. They were all taken care of by the disciples of the pharmacy hall. They were all stored in the warehouse. After pondering for a moment, Yang Ruping pinched the space between her eyebrows and said, No matter what, Zhang Xiaohu, you've just become the chief disciple of the Misty Hall and you've already made such a contribution. This hall is really gratified. If I had known, speaking until here, Yang Ruping's heart moved. She immediately changed the topic and said with a smile, Since Senior Li trusts you so much and our hall has appointed you as the special envoy with full authority, then you should carefully consider it. You should make a plan in your heart and go to the Misty Mountain Villa as soon as possible to contact them. And, if it's convenient, you can go this afternoon. The earlier the better. It will also show our sincerity. When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he complained in his heart. Nonsense, he couldn't provide the things that they wanted. He had to rely on Zhang Xiaohua. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua and Elder Yu who left in a hurry, Zhang Xiaohu knew that Ou Yan's illness had relapsed. Perhaps, her illness was even more critical. Although his matter was important, it wasn't worth mentioning compared to Ou Yan's life. Zhang Xiaohua definitely wouldn't leave Ou Yan behind to go to the Misty Mountain Villa with him. Since that was the case, what was the use of him going there recklessly? Was he going to seal her acupuncture points and sit there for a while before telling Li Jian that it was a mistake? But then again, Hall Master Yang had sent him. How could he refuse? Even more helpless, Zhang Xiaohu braced himself and forced a smile, I will obey Hall Master's orders. However, this disciple, Yang Ruping, frowned and said, Zhang Xiaohu, do you have any other difficulties? It's fine. If you do, feel free to tell me. This hall has already helped you. Alright, Zhang Xiaohu still wanted to try his luck and stall for time. But when he saw Yang Ruping's frown, he cupped his hands and said, it's nothing. This disciple just wants to ask. If Martial Ancestor Li has something to discuss with this disciple, what should I do if the time is delayed and he can't return at night? This excuse was very reasonable. Yang Ruping looked at Gao Kunheng. Vice Hall Master Feng smiled and said, it's fine, Martial Nephew Zhang. Since Hall Master Feng has already given you full authority as a special envoy, you can definitely handle such a small matter. Go ahead and do it. Lingering Fragrance Peak had a strict order forbidding the young disciples of the Misty Mountain Villa from privately meeting with the disciples of the Misty Mountain Villa. There had never been any cases of them staying overnight in the Taowu Mountain Villa. This matter really required Vice Hall Master Feng's approval. Zhang Xiaohu heaved a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands and bid farewell, I will obey the orders of the 3 Hall Masters. This disciple will go and prepare. After Zhang Xiaohu left, Yang Ruping's expression was somewhat complicated. She looked at Aunt Qin and then at Gao Kunheng. It seemed as though she had something to say, but she also had some misgivings. When Gao Kunheng saw this, he smiled and said, Senior Sister Yang, this disciple has already been at Shixin Peak for many days. After seeing Senior Sister manage the Misty Mountain Villa so well, I really admire you. In the future, I will still need Senior Sister's guidance. Please don't be stingy. Gao Kunheng had vaguely pointed out on the first day he came to the Misty Mountain Villa that his purpose this time was not the same as Zhong Pei's. He only came to assist Yang Ruping, not to compete with her. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohu, the two of them had some conflicts that could not be considered as competition, which made Yang Ruping feel uncomfortable and somewhat guarded. At this time, when she heard Gao Kunheng call her senior sister instead of Hall Master, she knew that he had made some concessions. She smiled and said, Junior Brother Feng, you worry too much. The Misty Mountain Villa is our Misty Mountain Villa. It is our common wish to make it beautiful together. Cough, cough. Vice Hall Master Gao almost coughed out tears. However, he still cleared his throat and said, Senior Sister Yang, just now did you feel that the change of Li Jian of the Misty Mountain Villa was a little strange? Yang Ruping hesitated for a moment. In fact, she wanted to discuss this with Aunt Qin privately behind Gao Kunheng's back. When she heard him say it directly, she had to nod and said, yes. Not to mention me, even Zhong Pei met with a nose full of dust. Zhang Xiaohu only went there once. How could it be so easy for him to settle it? Gao Kunheng smiled and said, Senior Sister Yang, as the ancient saying goes, those involved can't see the game clearly. You are in the game. Of course, you can't see it clearly as an outsider like me. Yang Ruping was even more surprised. Glancing at the silent Aunt Qin, she turned to Gao Kunheng and asked, Junior Brother Feng, please explain it to me. I don't dare. Gao Kunheng smiled and said, in fact, long before coming to the Shixin Peak, I have a general understanding of the situation of the Misty Mountain Villa. Although they have persisted for several years, their situation is getting worse and worse. Although Li Jian and others are supporting them, what can they do under our Shixin Peak? This compromise is just a matter of time. Oh. Yang Ruping nodded slightly. Zhong Pei had said the same thing many years ago, but Li Jian insisted on being self-sufficient and used practice to refute Zhong Pei's fallacy. This reason was obviously not convincing enough. Then Gao Kunheng said again, of course, this reason is slightly insufficient. The more important reason should be. Oh, Senior Sister Yang, have you heard of the story of the ancient people buying horse bones with 1,000 gold coins? Yang Ruping was stunned and immediately understood. She said with a look of understanding, Junior Brother Feng, do you mean that the Misty Mountain Villa's compromise is related to our important use of Zhang Xiaohu, the direct disciple of the Misty Mountain Villa? Gao Kunheng looked as if he had a card up his sleeve and said with a smile, yes, this is also the reason why the hierarch wants to use Zhang Xiaohu. Yang Ruping, on the other hand, was somewhat regretful. It was not that she had not thought of putting Zhang Xiaohu in an important position, but this so-called direct disciple's martial arts were just passable. It was not enough to convince the masses. Since the Misty Hall was newly established, they had to find some people with strong martial arts to support the facade and give Yang Ruping courage. This Zhang Xiaohu's name only flashed in the list of candidates and was forgotten in the corner. She didn't expect that the direct disciple could be used in this way and had such a strong appeal. Thinking of this, Yang Ruping was quite depressed. Once again, she felt that she was really not suitable to be the head of the Misty Mountain Villa. In fact, Yang Ruping also thought wrongly. As the ancients said, times create heroes. Well, there was also a saying, times are different. When the Misty Mountain Villa was newly established, the role of the direct disciple of the Misty Mountain Villa like Zhang Xiaohu was limited. Even if he was used by Yang Ruping, it might not be as effective as today. But now, the situation had changed, and it was the time for Zhang Xiaohu to rise. Chapter 809. That's right, how could Aunt Qin be in the mood to listen to their chatter? Ever since Elder Yu came to Shixin Peak, he had been staying in the back mountain of Shixin Peak and had never shown his face in the Misty Hall. Yan, like Li Jian, had a deep fear of Yang Ruping and never showed her face. Thus, Elder Yu's rash visit to the Misty Hall in search of the awakening pill was truly out of Aunt Qin's expectations. Aunt Qin originally had a good relationship with Yan, but now, one was in the Misty Hall in the front mountain and the other was in the Huanxi Manor in the back mountain. Both were guarded by lingering Fragrance Peak's disciples and it was extremely inconvenient for them to visit. Other than the first few difficult meetings, they rarely met. Aunt Qin didn't know what the awakening pill was, but seeing that Yang Ruping didn't seem to care too much about it, she knew that it was just an unorthodox treatment. Elder Yu also said that Yan's illness wasn't serious, which made Aunt Qin even more puzzled. If there wasn't anything important, why would Elder Yu suddenly come? Aunt Qin couldn't help but think a lot about this. Just as Aunt Qin was worrying about Yan, Zhang Xiaohua was also sitting in front of Yan's sickbed, at a loss of what to do. That's right, everything in Yan's body was normal, and there wasn't any discomfort in her pulse. Zhang Xiaohua also used his true energy to check Yan's body countless times, but he didn't find anything. Although Zhang Xiaohua had already placed all his attention on Yan's head, he also used his divine sense to scan it several times and didn't find anything strange. He really didn't have any effective methods. Right at this time, Elder Yu hurried back and asked anxiously as soon as he entered, Zhang Xiaohua, young miss, how is young miss? Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the anxious Elder Yu and shook his head slightly, not saying anything. Qiu Tong was still standing at the side, wiping her tears helplessly. Elder Yu stood dejectedly and didn't take another step forward. Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and gave up his seat. He walked out of the room alone and stroked his chin. He paced back and forth outside with a frown on his face, thinking about the key points of this matter. Time passed slowly. Unknowingly, it was already afternoon. Zhang Xiaohua still had no clue. Inside the room, Elder Yu had heard from Qiu Tong that Yan was in a similar situation. He walked over to Zhang Xiaohua and stared at him. Zhang Xiaohua, this old man has a question for you. Zhang Xiaohua stopped and nodded. Elder Yu, please speak. Miss, if it's like this, if your acupoints are sealed, is there any danger to your life? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. If we only look at the current situation, then this little one can say with certainty that his life is in no danger. It's just that I can't guarantee that there will be any changes in the future. You've seen it yourself. The spirit awakening pill was effective at that time. Who knows if there will be any changes now? If there are no unforeseen circumstances, will you strike Mrs. Acupoints every day or every once in a while? Well, of course. There will always be a time when the acupoint sealing technique fails. But Elder Yu wanted to say something but hesitated. Zhang Xiaohua understood and said with disappointment, Elder Yu, don't worry. I am indebted to Miss, so it won't take much effort to seal her acupoints. This little one swears to the heavens that as long as this little one has the slightest bit of strength left, I will do my best to save Mrs. life. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua make such a vow, Elder Yu didn't have much to say. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was only 17 or 18 years old and didn't have any burdens. It was fine for him to frequently come to the back of Shixin Peak to seal Oyan's acupoints to prolong her life, but who could guarantee that he wouldn't get tired of it in the future? Wouldn't he neglect her for other reasons? As the saying goes, there is no filial child in front of a sickbed for a long time. What's more, Zhang Xiaohua and Oyan were people who didn't have much to do with each other. Elder Yu's worry was very reasonable. All the favors that Oyan had done for Zhang Xiaohua in the early years had already been paid back by Zhang Xiaohua. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua had saved Oyan's life time after time. The situation had long been reversed, so what more could he ask of her? Elder Yu sighed and turned to leave. But after taking a few steps, he still turned back, unwilling to give up. Could it be that the cause of Mrs. illness can't be found? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head apologetically. Elder Yu, this little one's medical skills are not good enough. I only know that the source of the illness is at the head, but I don't know the cause. Sigh, that's true. If it's the meridians or internal organs of the body, it can also be found through the pulse and internal energy. But the head is delicate and can't be seen with the eyes. Perhaps, Miss really can only sleep for the rest of her life. Zhang Xiaohua was also dejected. Although she didn't reply, she sighed in her heart. Not only that, I've also checked Mrs. Head, and I can see clearly inside. Zhang Xiaohua thought to this point, but suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something. She took a step forward and grabbed Elder Yu, shouting loudly, Elder Yu, what did you say just now? Please say it again. Elder Yu jumped in fright and said in confusion, I said that Miss can only sleep for the rest of her life? Is that not the case? Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. No, Elder Yu, please repeat what you said just now in detail. Don't miss a single word. Elder Yu hurriedly said, this old man said that if it's the meridians or internal organs of the body, it can also be found through the pulse and internal energy. But Mrs. Head is delicate and can't be seen with the eyes. When the word eyes came out, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes immediately lit up. That's right, Yan's eyes couldn't see anything in her Naiwen palace. Even her divine sense could only probe and not see. But he was different. Didn't he have the delirium breaker magic eye? Even though he didn't know the use of the delirium breaker magic eye, he had only used it to close the strange restriction and only used it to look at himself. He had never used it other than to let it absorb his true energy and divine sense. Since he had used the delirium breaker magic eye to look at himself and the golden ball in his Naiwen palace, he should be able to see the situation in Yan's Naiwen palace as well. In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua's face lit up with joy. However, he was still cautious and smiled. Elder Yu is indeed an old ginger. This little one benefited greatly from it. After saying that, he quickly walked into the room. Elder Yu, who was behind him, was puzzled. He scratched his head and didn't know what was wrong with Zhang Xiaohua. When Zhang Xiaohua walked into the room, Qiu Tong was still silently wiping her tears in front of the bed. She had no idea that Zhang Xiaohua was here. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and patted Qiu Tong's shoulder. Big sister Qiu Tong, you can go out for a moment. When Qiu Tong heard that, she stood up blankly. Then, her face lit up with joy and she almost jumped up. She grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's hand and asked, Xiaohua, do you have a solution? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Big sister Qiu Tong, don't be anxious. I don't dare to make any guarantees. Let's wait and see. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't willing to reveal anything, Qiu Tong was happy. After all, this was a miracle. She might really be able to pull through. Hence, She jumped up and ran out. She didn't look like a woman in her 30s at all. When he saw Chiu Tong come out, Elder Yu stopped at the door. However, Zhang Xiaohua still walked to the door and said, "Elder Yu, big sister Chiu Tong, this little one's method is a little strange. It's best if the two of you don't watch. If it's possible, I think the two of you should take a walk outside the room." Of course, Elder Yu and Chiu Tong wouldn't leave. Chiu Tong pulled down the curtains and pushed Zhang Xiaohua, saying, "Hurry up and go. The young miss is still waiting for treatment. We'll stay here and not go anywhere. And, don't worry, the two of us aren't curious people. We definitely won't watch you do anything." Chiu Tong was no longer the same as before. She remembered that when Zhang Xiaohua first appeared to treat Yan, Chiu Tong kept asking questions. She was worried. Now that she saw Zhang Xiaohua and Yan alone in the same room, she did not say anything. She only hoped that Zhang Xiaohua could pull Yan back from the brink of death and pull her back from the fate of being in a coma for the rest of her life. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment. He knew that it wasn't realistic to send the two of them away. He nodded slightly and threw out a few jade talismans, surrounding Yan's room with restrictions. He had many secrets about the Tao of Immortality, and the Delirium Breaker Eye was even more unimaginable. How could he let others know about it? After Zhang Xiaohua finished his preparations, he walked to Yan's window. He didn't open the Delirium Breaker Eye in a hurry. Instead, he released his divine sense and unwillingly checked again. Only then did he reach out his left hand with his palm facing down. He aimed it at Yan's Naiwen Palace. He closed his eyes and used his divine sense to connect with the Delirium Breaker Eye in his left hand. In an instant, a heavy feeling of exhaustion overwhelmed him. Zhang Xiaohua knew that he wouldn't be able to use the Delusion Breaker Magic Eye for long, so he didn't dare to be negligent. Chapter 8:10. Sure enough, at the empty space above Yan's head, which was where her Naiwen Palace was located, there were some tiny dots that emitted a dark red glow. They were gathered there and flickered faintly. What's this? Zhang Xiaohua was curious. However, he knew that he didn't have much time and didn't have the time to think carefully about how to expel these dark red dots from her Naiwen Palace. Without hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and swept it towards those bright dots. Unexpectedly, those dark red dots were able to sense Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense. Without waiting for his divine sense to come close, they immediately moved forward. They were actually very fast. Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to scan Yan's Naiwen Palace. Those dark red dots were circling around the Naiwen Palace in front of his divine sense. It's so powerful. No wonder my divine sense couldn't see it. Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed in his heart and secretly regretted his carelessness. However, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't be blamed for this. Anyone would have this kind of thinking and wouldn't have thought that this thing could actually run in front of his divine sense. In that instant, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat curious. He formed a net with his divine sense and enveloped the entire Naiwen Palace. To Zhang Xiaohua's surprise, the dark red dots immediately dispersed and turned into an irregular sphere. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense spread out, he still couldn't see it. In that instant, Zhang Xiaohua understood that this irregular sphere should be the shape of Yan's Naiwen Palace. These dark red dots should be tightly attached to the walls of the Naiwen Palace. No wonder no matter how I scanned, I couldn't see anything strange. So this is the reason. Sigh, if not for the Delusion Breaker Eyes, how could I see it? Who is the one who did this? Sigh, actually, there's no need to say. This kind of immortal technique, other than the elders of the Lingering Fragrance Peak, who else could it be? However, if they wanted to make a move, why did they have to be so secretive? Why did they have to wait for so long? Maybe it's to avoid the sect leader. Zhang Xiaohua fell into deep thought. This was similar to his, Yan's, and Chiu Tong's conjecture. Just as he was thinking, a wave of drowsiness rushed over him. Zhang Xiaohua instantly woke up and quickly closed his delusion breaker eyes. He sat cross-legged and used the spirit guidance technique to replenish the heaven and earth origin qi. Then, he frowned and he started to think of a solution. However, Zhang Xiaohua had yet to fully comprehend the Naiwen Palace. And he didn't dare to infuse his qi into Yan's as he was afraid that it would damage Yan's brain. The talismans, simple talismans, the simple talisman. The rabbits, the three-legged crow talisman, the rooster talisman. Talisman, the talisman. Talismans. Talisman man. Talismans. Talismans was, talismans is, it's. Talismans s, talismans s, t's it uses to use its tit. It t it s it. That's the truth. Alas, it's more satisfying to fight with real weapons. This feeling of being helpless is really annoying. Unconsciously, Zhang Xiaohua raised his left hand in front of his eyes and opened his palm. Looking at the tightly closed, delusion breaker eyes, Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself, maybe I can only rely on this Dharma eye. But now, I can only open my eyes. I don't know how to use it. What should I do? At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua thought of the day in the Yulon Grand Canyon. The Dharma eye seemed to be able to emit white light. Would the white light have any use? With that thought, Zhang Xiaohua took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She opened the delusion breaker eyes in her left hand. At this moment, the dark red dots in Yan's Naiwen Palace gathered together and moved. Zhang Xiaohua aimed the Dharma eye at those dots and chanted in her heart, inhale, inhale, inhale. At this moment, the essence of Dan in Zhang Xiaohua's Naiwen Palace suddenly jumped. A strong divine sense was sent into the Dharma eye. Instantly, the Dharma eye shot out a silver-white brilliance and covered the dark red dots. The dark red dots didn't seem to have any reaction to the silver-white brilliance of the Dharma eye. They didn't move at all. Then, Zhang Xiaohua raised his left and right hand. The silver-white brilliance slowly shrunk and pulled the dark red dots out of Yan's Naiwen Palace out of thin air. Then, Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense. Just as he was about to scan the area, the dots seemed to have sensed it and wanted to move. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and immediately retracted his divine sense. He didn't know how long the silver-white brilliance could trap the dots. If he used his divine sense and the dots tried to escape, he might not be able to catch them. What should he do? Zhang Xiaohua was a little depressed. Then, he laughed involuntarily. Since the dots were already outside, all he had to do was to open his eyes. Why did he need to release his divine sense? When Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes and looked carefully at the dark red dots and the silver-white brilliance, he couldn't help but be shocked. These dark red dots, in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes, were small pitch-black insects. They were smaller than ordinary fleas. They had small antennae and two transparent wings on their backs. They didn't have any legs, only some irregular bumps around their small bodies. What kind of insects are these? Zhang Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and frowned. How should I deal with them? How can I kill these insects? Then, Zhang Xiaohua chanted in his heart, kill, kill, destroy, destroy. Unfortunately, it didn't work this time. The essence of cinnabar didn't move at all. The small insects in the silver-white brilliance flapped their small wings and floated in the silver-white brilliance. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua felt a slight movement in his arms. When Zhang Xiaohua looked down, something seemed to be moving in his arms. Did Little Black and Little Yellow wake up? Ever since Zhang Xiaohua gave Little Black and Little Yellow a prime stone shell, he had kept the two creatures that were even smaller than little mice in his arms. He no longer paid any attention to them, as if he had long forgotten about them. Now that he saw some movement, he was quite happy. But when he took out the squirming Little Yellow, he found that Little Yellow's eyes were still closed. Only its small nose kept twitching, as if it had smelled something. That nose was rushing towards Zhang Xiaohua's left hand. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes lit up. He placed Little Yellow's nose in front of the silver-white brilliance. As expected, Little Yellow's nose twitched even more violently. The pitch-black insects seemed to have sensed danger at this moment. They no longer floated in the air quietly. Instead, they flapped their wings and scattered in all directions. However, before they could fly up, the silver eye on Goldie's forehead suddenly opened. A thin ray of silver light shot out and enveloped the little bugs. Then, a suction force appeared and sucked the little bugs into the silver light of Goldie's eyes. When all the little bugs entered Goldie's silver light, Zhang Xiaohua immediately closed his eyes and focused on how Goldie would deal with them. Just as the insects were moving along the silver light and passed by Little Yellow's nose, a pale yellow brilliance suddenly shot out from Little Yellow's nose. The brilliance was like a waterfall that swept all the insects into Little Yellow's nose. Then, Little Yellow revealed a satisfied look. It opened its pink mouth and yawned. Then, it tilted its head and went back to sleep. Just as the yellow brilliance from Little Yellow's nose swept across the insects, in a secluded courtyard on Lingering Fragrance Peak, an old man in luxurious clothes was resting with his eyes closed. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically. He spat out, "This. How is this possible?" Before he could finish his sentence, he immediately opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of black blood. His face immediately turned pale gold. Then, he spat out a few more mouthfuls of blood before he slowly calmed down. The astonishment on his face did not disappear. He was almost in disbelief as he muttered to himself, "How is this possible? The spiritual puppet that I have cultivated for more than 50 years was destroyed. How can there be such a disciple on Shishim Peak? Even in the entire Lingering Fragrance Peak, there is no one who has such a remarkable ability." Then, the old man in luxurious clothes' expression changed again. Could it be? Lord Sect Leader personally took action. Perhaps only she has this kind of skill. As he said that, the old man forced himself to get up and walk to the side of a pavilion. He looked in the direction of Shishim Peak and laughed softly. Since Lord Sect Leader has taken action, I naturally have to avoid arousing suspicion. Oh Yen, you are really lucky. It seems that we have to think of another way. Then, he coughed a few times and the dark red blood spurted out onto his chest. Zhang Xiaohua did not know what had happened at Lingering Fragrance Peak. She looked at Little Yellow who was sleeping soundly and thought to herself, "This. The little black insect was destroyed just like that? This. Isn't this too simple?" However, ever since the black insect entered Little Yellow's stomach, there was no movement. Seeing that Little Yellow seemed to be full, the little black insect must have been eaten and destroyed by Little Yellow. Zhang Xiaohua was happy but also felt that it was ridiculous. What is this Little Yellow? It doesn't drink milk or eat grass. It actually eats something that can't even be stuffed into the gaps between its teeth. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not understand this question, she had destroyed the little black insect after all. Presumably, she had saved Yan's life. After putting Little Yellow back into her bosom, Zhang Xiaohua reached out to unseal the acupoints on Yan's head. At the same time, she released her divine sense. Sure enough, there was no loss of vitality this time. Yan's illness was indeed cured by Zhang Xiaohua. Before Yan woke up, Zhang Xiaohua quickly removed the restriction around the room and kept the jade talisman. After he was done, he heard Yan's moan. Before he could turn around to look, he heard a surprised and happy voice outside the door. "Miss, what's wrong?" Then, Chiu Tong lifted the curtain and rushed in. "Xiaohua, you will definitely arrive in time." Zhang Xiaohua felt close to her second brother's bear hug. She grumbled, "Second brother, be gentler. I am not second sister-in-law. If you hug me so tightly, I won't be able to take it." "Hey!" Zhang Xiaohu followed suit. He spat and extended his arm. He only held onto his shoulder and said, "Hurry up and do it, my brother. I have already delayed for a long time. Martial Ancestor Li is almost suspicious." Soon after, he sighed, "Moreover, this time, Martial Ancestor Li wants me to treat Martial Ancestor Lu's illness. How could I dare to do it without you around? I only found 2 other replacements." Zhang Xiaohua used her divine sense to scan the area and smiled, "I have an idea." As she spoke, she walked to the man whose joints were crushed and asked, "You should know about this martial uncle's injuries, right?" "Yes, martial uncle Su mentioned it before." "That's good. Second brother, you have some inner strength now. You should be able to crush this joint. Try it." Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly for a moment before nodding his head. That's right, how long would it take for Zhang Xiaohua to heal over 1,000 people by herself? No matter what, he had to lend a hand. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu stepped forward and used his hand to pinch martial Uncle Su's injured joints. Then, he gritted his teeth and used his energy to pinch them. Now, he couldn't help but be moved when he heard it. The so-called ambition was just a kind of struggle of the people in Misty School who couldn't see the future. It was sad to say it. Now that there was a goal and they could see the dawn, it was worth it to give up a little backbone. Therefore, Li Jian agreed with a clap of his hand. Of course, this operation must be done by the direct disciples of Misty School. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohu came in the afternoon, but Zhang Xiaohu's attitude was somewhat uncooperative. It seemed that he was unwilling to treat the disciples, especially Lu Qingyang. There was no other reason except that he was still exploring and there was no successful precedent. He was afraid of worsening the Grandmaster's condition. In the end, under Li Jian and Lu Qingyang's concession, only 2 ordinary disciples were found and let them receive Zhang Xiaohu's treatment. However, the treatment this time obviously took longer than the last time. Zhang Xiaohu didn't come out for a long time. "Old 5, you say, is there a problem?" Li Jian frowned. "How would I know? This grand disciple isn't very obedient today. Is there something wrong?" Lu Qingyang sat on the recliner and looked at the closed wooden door. He was also a little worried. Inside the thatched hut, Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was almost time. She stretched out her hand and transferred her true qi. After checking carefully, she smiled and said, "Okay, second brother, it seems that this medicinal pill is really magical. Although I didn't deliberately control it, there is medicinal power around the dantian and joints. They have already begun to recover. Well, of course, the effect is not as good as when I treated them before." Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed when he heard this. "That's good. In this case, I can treat them myself in the future. You don't have to do it every time." "That's right. There are thousands of people here. If you want to treat them like before, who knows how long it will take. However, thinking about Grandmaster Lu, Grandmaster Li, and the others, if you don't feel at ease, it's better to let me do it." Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "All right, it's settled then." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and then hesitated. "By the way, did Elder Yu look for you in the morning for something important? How's eldest Miss O's illness?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "It's fine. I finally found the source and cured eldest Miss O's illness in one fell swoop." "Well, that's good. However, you've been busy all morning. Can you treat the 2 grandmasters now? I see that they are also a little anxious. It's just that they can't say it out loud." "No problem." Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all and said directly, "Then let's do it now. The situation of the 2 grandmasters is just like this. Let them go back and rest." "Okay." Zhang Xiaohu rubbed his hands and turned to walk out. When Li Jian and Lu Qingyang saw Zhang Xiaohu come out, they went up to him and asked in a low voice, "Little Hu, how are the 2 disciples?" "Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Both of them are fine." Zhang Xiaohu also replied in a low voice. What about me? Lu Qingyang asked impatiently. Li Jian glared at him and said, Little Hu just finished treating the two of them. You should at least let them rest for a while. Zhang Xiaohu cupped his hands and said, Grandmaster Lu, please wait for a moment. After this disciple has awakened the two grandmasters and sent them out, I'll invite the two grandmasters in. The two of them? Li Jian frowned and said in a low voice, Little Hu, this isn't appropriate. We're all under the eyes of the disciples of Lingering Fragrance Peak. If they find out, it won't be a small matter. Then I'll ask the two grandmasters to make a decision. Zhang Xiaohu immediately pushed the problem to them. He turned around and returned to the thatched hut. He awakened the two disciples and sent them out. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat curious, Zhang Xiaohua immediately stopped this topic. This is complicated to explain. You'll naturally know in the future. Right now, I'm only saying that as long as you cultivate properly, it won't be long before you can catch up to martial ancestor Li. Second brother, don't forget about the black and white ball of qi in your dantian. I reckon that even martial ancestor Li might not be able to understand it. When the black and white ball of qi was mentioned, Zhang Xiaohu said with a mournful expression, I still haven't told martial ancestor Li about the matter of me cultivating the Plain Domain Sutra. I don't know what kind of reaction he'll have if he hears about it. What kind of reaction can he have? He'll probably be overjoyed. You're the best of two sections. Others can't even beg for it. You should also tell him about the matter of being the chief disciple. He should also know that if it wasn't for the Plain Domain Sutra, how could the Lingering Fragrance Peak give you this position? But, martial ancestor Li's hatred for the Lingering Fragrance Peak isn't something new. If he blames us. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Li Jian and sneered, based on what? Based on the fact that you restored his martial arts? Based on the fact that you restored the martial arts of thousands of Misty School's disciples? If he dares to say anything unpleasant, you can just leave. Let's see what he'll do then. Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohu scolded, you can only say these words to me. Don't let anyone else know. Martial ancestor Li is our martial ancestor after all. We can only let him know about my difficulties. How can you threaten him by taking credit? Bullshit, Zhang Xiaohua said disdainfully, second brother, don't get it wrong. You're from the Misty School, but I'm not. I'm from the famous Beta School. Beta School? Zhang Xiaohu stared blankly, you're from the Beta School? How come I've never heard you mention it? Oh, is there such a sect in the Jianghu? Hehe, it doesn't matter if you haven't heard of it. Although I'm the only one from the Beta School right now, there will be a day when its name will resound throughout the Jianghu. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu finally realized that the Beta School was just Zhang Xiaohua's nonsense. He only laughed and said, keep bragging, keep bragging. It won't be too late for you to brag to me after you've gotten two disciples from the Beta School. Hehe. You still don't believe me? Who knows how many people would want to worship me as their master if I were to raise my voice. However, when she saw Zhang Xiaohu's face full of contempt, she stomped her foot and shouted, I have nothing to say to you. How can a sparrow know the ambitions of a swan? Then, she fled. After Zhang Xiaohua left, Zhang Xiaohu was dumbfounded. He lowered his voice and said, Xiaohua, it's fine if you want to leave, but you should have unsealed the two martial ancestors' acupoints first. After calling out like this a few times, Zhang Xiaohua jumped out from the side and muttered, how many times do I have to say it? They're your martial ancestors, not mine. Then, a few kicks landed on their bodies and they disappeared in the blink of an eye. This child, really? She's already 18 years old. Zhang Xiaohu secretly shook his head, however, what she said is also somewhat reasonable. Perhaps it's time to explain things today. With this thought, Zhang Xiaohu unsealed Li Jian's acupoints. Li Jian woke up, but he wasn't in a hurry to stand up. Instead, he sat cross-legged and silently used his heart technique to check. Unfortunately, his internal energy was still the same as before, unable to condense. However, the warm feeling coming from his dantian was very similar to what Zhou Mufeng said. Li Jian stood up and looked at Lu Qingyang. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly explained, martial ancestor Lu's injuries are more serious than martial uncle Shi's. Her joints were re-crushed and the pain will be unbearable. It's better to seal her acupoints first and wait a few days. Martial ancestor Lu's acupoints were sealed by this disciple using the Misty School's acupoints sealing technique. Our Misty School's disciples should be able to unseal them. Then, with some hesitation, he said, in addition, this disciple still has some things to report to martial ancestor Li. Li Jian nodded and smiled. Xiaohu, let's go. Follow me to the assembly hall to talk. After saying that, he went out first and ordered his disciples to properly settle Lu Qingyang down. Then, he brought Zhang Xiaohu to the assembly hall. After the two of them sat down, Zhang Xiaohu told him about his practice of the Suhuan heart technique and the matter of being the head disciple. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohu expected, Li Jian's face was somewhat gloomy. After a long while, Li Jian coldly said, Xiaohu, as a direct disciple of the Misty School, the internal energy heart technique you practice must be the Misty School's divine technique. No matter how good the internal energy heart technique of other schools is, you can't casually practice it. What's more, you want to be the head disciple of the Misty School, so you should set an example and become the role model for all the disciples of the Misty School. If your martial arts are not the martial arts of the Misty School, how can you still have the face to be the head disciple of our Misty School? Zhang Xiaohu bitterly smiled. He knew that this would be the result. He stood up and cupped his hands. Many thanks for martial ancestor Li's guidance. This disciple understands. This disciple will not dare to mention the matter of being the head disciple again. Du Feng touched his nose and said, Junior brother Ren is joking. It's just a little epiphany. I've already understood it. I just wanted to be lazy. That's why. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, you don't have to say it. It's not easy for you Misty Hall disciples to be free for half a day. Junior brother Ren is the most considerate. Oh, this is the details of the transaction. Please check it out, Junior brother Ren. As he spoke, Du Feng took out two thick booklets from his bosom and handed them over. Zhang Xiaohua took them in confusion and flipped through them. One booklet contained the names of the elixirs and the other the names and quantities of the medicinal herbs. Needless to say, the booklet of elixirs was provided by the Pill Expanding Hall to the Misty Hall and the medicinal herbs were provided by the Misty Hall to the Pill Expanding Hall. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the details of the transaction. Seeing the blank look on Zhang Xiaohua's face, Du Feng went forward and pointed at the two booklets and explained the relationship between the two items. Zhang Xiaohua immediately sucked in a breath of cold air and blurted out, why is it so shady? After saying that, he felt a little regretful. He was now a disciple on duty in the Pill Expanding Hall and his words were a little overboard. Sure enough, Du Feng looked at Zhang Xiaohua strangely and said, these are the details of the transaction given by your Pill Expanding Hall. In the past, the conditions were even harsher than these. After my hall master repeatedly resisted, the conditions were lowered and junior brother Ren saw it today. Sigh, the Misty Hall is really pitiful. I had already mentally prepared myself and knew that they would be slaughtered, but I didn't expect them to be slaughtered so ruthlessly. The Pill Expanding Hall actually asked for 10 sets of medicinal herbs for one elixir. What is this for? Although the disciples of the Misty Hall are outsiders, they will be a family in the future. There is no need to be so anxious. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was deep in thought, Du Feng whispered again, Junior brother Ren, don't worry. These details are only on the surface and are for the disciples of the lingering fragrance peak to see. Many of our actual operations are not recorded in these booklets. Oh? Zhang Xiaohua frowned again and lowered her voice. She rubbed her thumb and index finger together and smiled, that is to say, these are not recorded in this booklet. Haha, of course. Du Feng took out a booklet from his chest and handed it over. This is the secret booklet that we actually use for our operations. What? Zhang Xiaohua almost fainted. Who was he trying to fool by making it so complicated? Zhang Xiaohua didn't accept the secret booklet and only pointed at it with a smile. Why is our account so thin? Junior brother Ren, you still don't understand? Of course, what should be recorded in our own accounts should be recorded and what should not be recorded should not be recorded. We just need to record it secretly. Of course, it can save a lot of paper. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. It seemed that there were rules and countermeasures everywhere. Although the Misty Hall had just joined the Lingering Fragrance sect, they were not exempt from the rules. Immediately, Zhang Xiaohua felt a chill in her heart. How could she be in the mood to do such shady business? She didn't even look at the booklet in her hand and handed it over to Du Feng. Senior brother Du, this kind of thing, the Pill Expanding Hall's senior brother must have done it before. You also know how they do it. I don't have the patience to do this, so I will have to trouble senior brother Du. Please do it for me. This. Du Feng was a little embarrassed and said, it is not impossible to do it, but this is junior brother Ren's privacy. It is not appropriate for me to overstep. It doesn't matter. Senior brother Du is not an outsider. I trust you to do it. Zhang Xiaohua didn't care at all. She didn't intend to give the elixir to the Pill Expanding Hall. She gave it to Zhang Xiaohu. Her bad reputation in the Shixin Peak was not only for taking liberties with her junior sister, but also for being greedy. It was not a big deal. Okay. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua trusted him, Du Feng had to nod. Oh, and senior brother Du, if you don't have enough people, you can ask Xiao Binghe, Mu Tangchun, and the others to help. Since I promised them before, let them see if I'm being unfair to the Misty Hall. Du Feng was even more speechless about Zhang Xiaohua's additional request. She had already explained that there were two kinds of accounts. Where was the fairness? After thinking for a moment, he could only say, since junior brother Ren said so, this one will ask them to come and help tomorrow. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. He had a strange feeling in his heart. He didn't know that there were so many tricks involved in the simple transaction between the Pill Repository Hall and the Misty School. He had agreed to let Xiao Binghe and the others supervise from the side. But now, it seemed that even if he wanted to treat it fairly, it was impossible. Moreover, to be clear, even if Xiao Binghe was standing on the side and watching this transaction with his own eyes, how would he know the inside story of the other transactions under the table? Fairness and truth were often the patent of those with power and influence. Chapter 8:15. At the top of Shixin Peak, in the hidden alchemy room, the greenish-yellow earth fire was licking the huge, 8 trigrams purple gold furnace. In front of the alchemy furnace, there was an abnormally tall and skinny youth sitting on a dark green praying mat. His eyes were closed and his hands were placed in front of his chest. He was in a strange position and did not move at all. At this moment, a rich medicinal fragrance suddenly floated out from within the alchemy furnace. The youth frowned and did not open his eyes. The fingers on his right hand moved slightly and made a few movements with incomparable dexterity. Immediately after, he hit the alchemy furnace and the rich medicinal fragrance immediately dissipated a little. Following which, the youth's right hand continuously moved as if he was playing a pipa. He continuously hit the alchemy furnace with his hand until the medicinal fragrance could no longer be smelled. Only then did he stop. Then, the youth returned to his previous appearance. After a long while, the youth's body suddenly became blurry as if he was going to hide in the air. However, the youth's forehead was already covered in sweat. Finally, the youth's body suddenly trembled and his clothes fluttered even though there was no wind. Then, he let out a long sigh and opened his eyes. He said to himself dejectedly, Sigh, why is this flying technique so hard to practice? Just one of the body concealing techniques is already so difficult to understand. Flying in the air is really difficult. Looking at the youth's small eyes, small nose, and small forehead, wasn't it Zhang Xiaohua who boasted of her good character? Zhang Xiaohua stood up and released her divine sense. Looking at the elixir liquid in the 8 trigrams purple gold furnace, the corners of her mouth revealed a trace of a smile. This is already the last batch of meridian nourishing pills. Now, it is the time for the pills to form. In a few days, the pills will be formed. Hee, I wonder if I can pull out 45 pills from this batch? Or 54? Sigh, no matter how many pills it is, after refining pills for second brother for several months without sleep and rest, it should be more than 1,000 pills. It can be considered as not letting down the Misty School. Presumably, Zhang Xiaohua shrugged her shoulders and made a gesture. She escaped into another alchemy room and did the same for the bone solidifying pill. Then, with a relaxed face, she went straight out of the alchemy room and went to the top of Shirxin Peak. She sat cross-legged on a huge rock and looked at the turbulent clouds in the sea of clouds thoughtfully. At this time, it had been more than 3 months since Zhang Xiaohua became the chief disciple of the Misty Hall. It had also been 3 months since Zhang Xiaohua became the disciple on duty of the Pill Opening Hall and presided over the transaction between the Pill Opening Hall and the Misty Hall. Thinking of the first time she represented the Pill Opening Hall to trade with the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Speaking of the transaction between the two halls, it was not as simple as Zhang Xiaohua thought, but it was also not more complicated. Before the transaction, the Misty Hall had already registered the pills they needed and sent a disciple to send it to the Pill Opening Hall. The Pill Opening Hall also wrote down the herbs they should collect one by one according to the Misty Hall's booklet and the agreement they had previously drawn up. They also recorded the years and other things and sent it back to the Misty Hall. These 2 booklets were what Zhang Xiaohua saw Du Feng send over on the eve of the transaction. What Zhang Xiaohua needed to do was to count the herbs sent over by the Pill Opening Hall according to the booklet returned by the Pill Opening Hall and see if the contents were consistent with the booklet. Then, she would send the pills sent by the Pill Opening Hall to the Misty Hall according to the booklet of the Misty Hall and let Du Feng count them one by one. The 2 of them would then sign on the 2 booklets. Zhang Xiaohua's previous senior brothers were all embarrassed when counting the herbs of the Misty Hall and wanted to gain more benefits for themselves. In order to fulfill her promise, Zhang Xiaohua let Xiao Binghe and Mu Tangchun take her place to count the herbs of the Misty Hall. Of course, there was no possibility of blackmailing the Misty Hall. Zhang Xiaohua's action immediately beautified his image of flirting with his junior sister, and the disciples of the Misty Hall looked at him with more kindness. Of course, this was all on the surface. Secretly, Du Feng handed over 30% of the pills traded between the 2 halls to Zhang Xiaohua, as a benefit for Zhang Xiaohua to be stationed at the first Faith Peak. If it was the previous senior brother, he would have been grinning from ear to ear and would have been thinking about how to return to the White Mountain Peak and who to give the pills to in order to seek his future. But Zhang Xiaohua accepted it calmly and gave it to Zhang Xiaohu without any change in her expression. These pills were many times worse than the ones refined by Zhang Xiaohua. If it was the herbs, he could still swallow his saliva to express his feelings. But these pills were just pleasing to the eye but useless. They were even worse than copper coins. He couldn't even feel good about it. But these pills that could not be seen in Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were put to great use in the hands of Zhang Xiaohu. At first, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu discussed and decided to return to the Misty Hall. But now, Zhang Xiaohu happened to be the special envoy of the Misty Hall and was dealing with the poor Li Jian and Lu Qingyan. Although the Misty Hall had gradually begun to accept the aid of the Misty Hall, the lingering Fragrance Peak still had some scruples and did not agree to all requests. If your martial arts were inferior to mine, then you would definitely be suppressed by me. Zhang Xiaohu did not know that Ding Chao, who was beside him, had so many thoughts in an instant. He only gave Li Qian a few words of advice before following Ding Chao back to Ethereal Hall. He wanted to see what the purpose of Lingering Fragrance Peak was. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.